Do you know which ones you wrote by emails on this day?
Yes, I spent some time today. I tried to clear my backlog. I got most of the math academy.
This regular meeting of the May 21st regular meeting of the Fairfield Board of Education is called to order. Present, we have Ms. Pitko, Ms. Sleeper, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Greber, myself, Mrs. Vitale, Dr. Jones, Mr. Asa, Ms. Jacobson, Mrs. Max Canelli, Mr. Peterson, Ms. Phillips, Ms. Coolidge, and Ms. Solari. I'm going to ask you to all please rise to the pledge. And Ms. Solari, will you please lead us in the pledge tonight?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Start with our student reports. We'll start with Fairfield Ludlow High School. Ms. Coolidge?
Okay, so first off, we have our National Honor Society Senior Recognition this Wednesday, where we will be showing where all of the highly achieved seniors will be going to college. Also, our senior internships are starting this Thursday, so our seniors' last day will be tomorrow. And then we had our senior prank today, which was the slip and slide out on the turf. And then lacrosse, girls have a record of 12-4 the season, with a huge upset with Pomprog, which was previously undefeated. They beat them 13-12, and they defeated Wilton, which was also a big upset. And then girls tennis made it through to the first round of FCX and will be competing in states on Friday. The Tri-M Honors Orchestra has given out a scholarship to Xenia Afimov and will be having their induction tonight. And then girls golf had beat Wilton today and beat Greenwich recently. And yesterday we had our Grim Reaper Day, which was the educative day about drinking and driving before the seniors head off to prom. So, yes.
Going off of what Katie said about the National Honor Society, junior inductees tomorrow will be honored for academic achievements and commitment to the Fairfield Ludlow High School community. We also had the Fairfield Ward baseball game. Ludlow won 5-4, defending our record as one of the best teams in the state. Sorry. We had junior prom over the weekend. It was at the Trumbull Marriott, and kids had a lot of fun dining, dancing, and having an all-around great time with friends. And to wrap it up, we had the FLHS Rocketry Club compete recently. They came first out of all the Connecticut schools at recent qualifiers, and will be advancing to the National 2019 Team American Rocketry Challenge all the way in Virginia. So we're really excited about that.
And from Fairfield Ward?
Yes. Last Friday, our AP exams came to an end, so students worked very hard for those. We also held our National Honor Society in our own auditorium. Our current juniors were inducted, and then we also said goodbye to our seniors with a slideshow, and we're very proud of them. Ward also had the pleasure of hosting French exchange students for almost 2 weeks. Students really enjoyed having them in our school, and we also had held a farewell ceremony to send them off at the end. Our unified sports team held their spring track meet at Fairfield Ludlow High School, and some of our sports teams are still in the midst of playing in the FCAC and state tournaments, so we wish them luck. We had a very successful junior prom on Saturday night. It was a ton of fun. The dance took place in our very own courtyard underneath a tent, and students loved it. We look forward to welcoming a team of 15 educators from New Canaan High School this Thursday to observe our block schedule and also meet with teachers, students, and administrators. And we all wish you a very nice Memorial Day weekend, 4.5 days. We're very excited. And also, I just wanted to take the opportunity. I know JR isn't here, but he also says the same. He's been a great partner to work with as a senior, and we thank all of you for allowing us to come each time to say our award news. And also, we want to give a special shout out to Mr. Ebling, because we'll miss him a lot next year. So thank you.
Well, you beat me to it, because I wanted to thank you all, ladies, for just representing your school so well, and for it was a treat to have you take part in some of our conversations. We welcome your perspective and wish you the best of luck for next year. For our seniors, where are you off to? Will you mind sharing a little bit about what your plans are?
I'm going to George Washington University in the fall.
Do you know what you'll be studying?
Journalism.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions for our student representatives? All right, Ms. Coolidge, I have to ask about the senior prank. I heard that you were going to set alarm clocks. Did that end up happening and they were all going to go off in class and Mr. Hatzis was going to have to, turn them off?
No comment.
Okay, I'll have to, I guess, ask my senior when I get home. Thank you, ladies. You're welcome to stay, or if you have other things to do, you're welcome to take your leave for the evening. Have a great time at prom for those attending next week. Time for public comment. Any members of the public like to give comment to the board? We're taking comment on agenda items only. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Each speaker will have 3 minutes.
Colleen Phelan, 100 Jenny Lane. My daughter Megan is graduating this year from Fairfield Ludlow High School. While there, she was an honor roll student, 3-time All-FCIAC and 2-time All-State swimmer, captain of the swim team, Dyer team, and treasurer of the Make-A-Wish Company. Outside of school, she was a Connecticut Swimmer Scholar athlete, anchored forward relays that were in the top 20 in the nation, and most importantly, she's a happy kid. She heads to Bucknell this fall, and she's going to be a member of their swim and dive team. I say this not to brag, although I am really proud. But I'm outlining her bigger accomplishments to put in contrast to what Yale told me about my daughter when she was 2.5 years old. At that evaluation at Yale, we were told she was on the autism spectrum. She had significant deficits. Her future did not include Bucknell. Her future did not include graduating from this high school. Her future was going to be at a residential facility, and with luck and a lot of work, she'd be able to speak and tell us what she needed. That day, came home to my husband, and we spoke to our birth of 3 person who said, no, she needs to go to ECC, not the school they suggested, which is CCCD. I don't know why I listened to Denise Leverty to this day over the experts at Yale, but I'm glad I did. Megan was initially placed in the intensive autism class. The change was remarkable. She went from having 3 words to she graduated, me wishing she didn't have as much speech therapy as she did when she was there. She left for Dwight, and a few years later, she didn't need any supports. Now, my husband and I have thought long and hard about what was the magic pill that made her path so different, and it was ECC. That's the only thing we can tell that made the impact. Birth of 3 certainly helped, but the difference between when she came to ECC and left was tremendous. The collaboration with the teachers, SLPs, OTs, psychologists, social workers, and the nurse was critical to Megan. And I'm not just talking about the ones that were assigned to her case. The water cooler collaboration from people who didn't even work with Megan was critical to her success. If Jerry Ann Mitchell didn't know what to do, she would walk down the hall, talk to someone else. They figured out a plan. It wasn't just people assigned to her case, it was everyone in that building. In fact, my husband reminded me that it was Jerry Ann and her OT, Kelly, who said she should take swimming lessons. It would be good for her. It would help organize her sensory system. Little did we know how important that was to her. ECC is a system that works, and having everyone in a consistent facility and a single facility is important for our special needs preschoolers. I hope as you talk about the ECC's future, you simply don't address the financial costs, but the cost to our special needs preschoolers if you dilute the value of what ECC works for our children. Thank you.
Jerry Ann Mitchell, Early Childhood Center. Esteemed members of the board, I respectfully request that the administration's proposal to relocate the ECC as outlined over the next few years be rejected. You've listened as parents, staff, and siblings, and Colleen has shared Megan's amazing story. That is just one of our amazing success stories. We have shared our opinions on the efficacy of a centralized ECC. You received our letter outlining our concerns with the operational difficulties of this proposed plan. The immediacy of need was what resulted in the recent decision to split the ECC between Ward and Stratfield next year. Decisions and rubrics were made and influenced and shaped by both time constraints to have a solution for the fall of 2019, as well as limitations related to the existing facilities available. Many of us were shocked by Dr. Jones' definition of a short-term solution as 5 to 10 years. Yet here we are, just a few months later, with a vastly different plan with multiple moves and no mention of future moves or the future impact of redistricting and or the completion of Mill Hill will have on anything of the current proposed moves. Time is now on our side. We have a short-term solution in place. The fall is set. I respectfully request that we explore all options. Can we form a committee now that there is no longer an immediate time constraint and explore alternate options? Has the Board of Ed exhausted all real estate possibilities, considered other town-owned buildings, or reached out to members of the community for additional resources? It just seems like an additional moves are being hypothesized without a full long-term vision, and there's still so many unknown variables coming into play. I and the staff of ECC, as evidenced in the letter that you have already received, believe that a centralized, family-focused ECC that utilizes developmentally appropriate practice will continue to be the optimal solution. We are willing to do what is needed to reach this goal. Please give us a chance and work within the initial solution of Ward and Stratfield while all the other variables are developed and considered. The efficacy of early intervention benefits the town in the future. Please give us the time to craft a well-developed, comprehensive plan for the future rather than the current multi-relocations proposed. Thank you again for listening.
Hi, Mary Lupo, 95 High Lawn Road. I'm a Holland Hill parent. Next year, I will have a 4th grader, a 2nd grader, and a kindergartner. So I will be a Holland Hill parent for many years to come. When my oldest was in kindergarten, talk of the renovation began to take place. And I was excited about the prospect of all 3 of my children having the opportunity to attend a school that not only had an incredible community and staff, but a building to match. As the construction is coming to a close, and we are able to see what a wonderful environment our children will have, we are grateful for all that the Board of Education and the town of Fairfield has done for our school. We can envision a school with no portable classrooms, with music in its own specially designed room, with a computer lab so testing can take place without closing the library, with ample space for our many special education teachers and the students they serve, and with proper locations for PT and OT services. However, just as this vision is starting to become a reality, we are told we have plenty of space to hold students from the Early Childhood Center, which is outgrowing its own space. So instead of a great vision for our school, we have many unanswered questions. Most importantly, we don't know how many preschool students you anticipate attending Holland Hill. Will this be one of only 2 locations? With the expected enrollment of ECC at 170 students, does that mean at least 85 preschoolers will now be in our school? That is currently larger than any one of our K through 5 grade levels. So how many classrooms will they need? Where will their support staff have office space? Where will their teachers find parking in our crowded lot? The list of questions specific to ECC at Holland Hill could continue, as they did in my email to you earlier today. But it also leads to more broader questions. How does the placement of ECC factor into the charge of redistricting the board is currently contemplating? And is the solution a Band-Aid that will have to be fixed again in 5 years? Even with our new 504 capacity, adding 85 students to our approximately 365 students places us just under the 90% utilization target of the Board of Ed. With our enrollment expected to increase over the next 5 years, we will once again be in an overcrowded situation, a disservice to both the Holland Hill and ECC students that will be there. All the issues we tried to remedy with our renovation and expansion will be returned. I sincerely hope as you contemplate this decision, you are thinking about this and other questions I posed as well. I urge you not to make a final decision until you understand all the implications. Thank you for your time and all you do for the students of Fairfield.
Good evening. Sarah White. I live at 214 Wilton Road. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the proposed Math Academy. I realize this is a very difficult budget year, and I know that starting a new program when times are tough is not ideal, but the relatively small cost of this program makes it worth keeping in the budget. Why should you vote to fund the Math Academy? We needed to help serve a group of students whose needs, frankly, are not being met with the current system. Although teachers differentiate to the best of their ability, highly qualified math students in Fairfield do not have opportunities to achieve to their potential. Advanced readers are put into higher reading groups. Talented violin players are invited to participate in honors orchestra. It is in these environments that children thrive among their similar peers, but no program exists for students whose strength and passion is math. I've been a math teacher in a neighboring district for 19 years. During my career, I have taught students that are both heterogeneously and homogeneously grouped. I've personally experienced how challenging it is as an educator to adapt my lesson to my high, low, and middle learners all in the same classroom. I know how much more students can achieve when they're among students of similar ability. Different levels of math classes allow students to learn and grow at a pace that is appropriate for them, whether they are students who excel or struggle in math. I appreciate that Fairfield's school system allows students to learn at their appropriate level once they're in middle school. But why wait? Why are we holding back students who would thrive in this environment? The Math Academy will meet students' needs and give them an opportunity to reach their full potential. Please vote to keep this important program in the budget. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to give comment? Okay, just to remind you.
I'm Nicole Stanton, 1041 Burroughs Road. I'm actually coming to advocate as a former ECC parent and a parent who owns a home in the Jennings district whose children have gone through Jennings School. I am a hardcore believer that ECC should be located in one building. My son's story, while not as dramatic, was very similar to that of the first speaker. With that said, I wanted to remind the board that looking a little bit creatively at some of what the ECC does, and this is a little bit out there, but I remember when my son was at the ECC, a program that existed at the time was a true pre-K program designed to assist kids in transitioning. I'm going to say, in the hopes of keeping the ECC in one building, which it is called a center for a reason, if other space needs to be utilized, maybe some thought can be given to using that space to help transition a pre-K community or the students that are looking to possibly have transition issues. I don't know if that's something that can be done or would be looked at, but I'm asking all things to be considered. The other thing I'd like to say with regard to managing some of the purchases going forward is we do not need Chromebooks for 6th graders. We are already in a situation where we purchased 4 years of Chromebooks for our high school students without, by the way, seeing the privacy agreement before that purchase was made. And those Chromebooks are all going to expire simultaneously. I do not want this district buying Chromebooks for 6th graders and putting ourselves on the hook for an additional expense when those Chromebooks expire. We are not set up for it. We weren't set up for it this year, and I do not think it should be part of the budget going forward. Thank you. Jessica Gerber.
Would anybody else like to give comment this time? Just a reminder, we do take public comment at the end of the meeting and before all voting items. Seeing no other members of the public coming forward, moving on to approval of superintendent's recommended 2019-2020 budget adjustments. Can I have a motion? Mr. Asa, seconded. Mr. Dwyer? Opening up to the board for any questions or comments.
We have we have a variety of options. It's not clear to me what the final recommendation was from the staff, so I wonder if that could be clarified. Which of these columns represents that?
And thank you, Mr. Dwyer. Column 11, which is called alternate adjustments, is our final recommendation. And the difference between column 9 and column 11 was getting feedback from our elementary principals about the elementary wireless project. There were some reservations that putting that off could be a concern, so we reached out to make sure the elementary principals felt like the wireless was functioning okay in their buildings, that they felt comfortable pushing it off a year, and we heard from 10 out of 11 of our principals unanimously were comfortable pushing that back to 2020, 2021. So it would be column 11.
And so if I can, the motion as written doesn't specify column 11, and whether perhaps once we finish with any amendments, whether column 11 should be the base with which we are talking. And the motion ought to perhaps suggest that. I don't know how to handle that commentary, but so that the motion will be clear.
I was also going to just mention the difference between column 9 and column 11. We know that the school allocation reduction was difficult for some of the board members, so by offsetting that wireless, we were able to get that allocation down to 7.5%. And for most of our buildings, at 7.5% going into next year, they'll actually have more than they had this year because of the givebacks. So it's actually not truly a reduction unless they are seeing some enrollment decreases, but especially like at high school where I know some of you were concerned about that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Christine?
Ms. Jacobson?
Through the chair to Dr. Jones, I had sent in a couple of questions on a few things, and I know you were out, so I just want to follow up on those questions. The 2 sheds for the athletics department, can we be reminded of how long those items have been on our maintenance list?
This was the first year.
Okay.
They were on the maintenance list.
And did we reach out to the athletic directors to find out whether that would be a big deal to them, or if they have another higher priority need for $5,000 and currently that in maintenance that they need done?
Yeah, I was in the meeting with the athletic directors when we went through just general needs of athletic fields. Most of it is not funded through our operating budget. This is something that Mr. Cullen was trying to do, and we thought for $5,000 for each school site. Would they like to have them? Absolutely. But the trade-off was, when we were looking at it by column 11, was, are we looking at the Math Academy or the sheds? And there was a request also from the board that there were some that would like to have the discussion about the Math Academy. So, and it really were those 2 items that the board was, from your input, we're switching back and forth.
Okay. And then the other questions that I had were on the Walter Fitzgerald additions. Can you just specify a little bit about what the 5,000 and any of these columns represents in terms of that project? Because I know we had relocation and renovation funds put in next year's budget, so I just want to understand what these dollars coming out from that allocation represent.
Line 28, which says the facility expense WFC, that is actually a reduction in the lease. That came in a little bit less than we anticipated. When you look at the major maintenance project, we initially had $200,000 put in WFC. As you know, our lease was kind of in flux right up until the end of the year, and that was in case we needed to relocate. Since we know that we have a lease now for the whole year, this leaves some funds in there to be able to, if we want to do some painting, we would like to do the electrical, make sure they have that air conditioning unit. And so that money is to really help the building be where we feel more comfortable for our students next year and teachers.
Okay. So is the lease now going to be 100 or 105?
Ms. Munsell, do you know the exact amount of WFC lease?
I think it was 110 in the budget, so it must be 105 maybe?
I know it's 5,000 less, but I don't know. Let's see if she can find it for us.
It's not a big question. I just
wanted
to clarify that. For right now, I'm good to pass on to other people Thanks, Christine.
Any other board members? Mr. Asa?
Just for clarification, in Tier 1, we have the sheds listed at $10,000. In Tier 2, they're listed also? So,
That was the original, when you first looked at this at the last meeting. When you're looking at it right now, those have actually, like the shed is line 27. It's up there as an alternate adjustment. It's in the alternate column for an adjusted amount.
okay, so that's just down here in Tier 2 because
Yeah.
we didn't touch that.
Originally, when we talked about this at the last board meeting, we were over there on column 3. So this is showing you how it's transpired from then to now.
Okay, and can anyone shed any light onto exactly what these sheds, or remind us what these sheds would be used for? They're not shelter for people, right? It's just equipment?
They're basically equipment sheds. I don't know, Mr. Papa, George, do you want to address what style of shed?
Or what will be
Yeah.
stored in it? Yeah, why were they needed?
Angels Popchurch, Interim Executive Director of Operations. The sheds that were proposed were asked for by the athletic departments for storage located closer to the fields. For instance, Ward was asking for one next to the baseball field as opposed to the sheds way out or the garages way out on the field, so they can keep their equipment there. They've kind of outgrown the shed on the field already. Their baseball coach, who also teaches in the building, uses their room for storage for some equipment, so we want to get it back out where it belongs. No, there would be no personal storage. It's the type of shed you would see from that Cloder farm. It's a pre-built drop-in-place shed.
Sorry, are you done?
Okay, Ms. Jacobson?
I just have a follow-up. These $5,000 to each high school are part of maintenance funds, though, correct?
Correct.
They're on our maintenance list.
Yep.
So are you aware of any other maintenance items at either of our high schools in terms of athletics directors that are of more urgent need that they've expressed to you?
Not anything more urgent. They do provide us a list every year that we sit down and go over with them, so we try to prioritize what is needed. There is some other minor repairs that we are going to handle as well this year.
That's not on our current maintenance
No,
list?
it's out of operations, so it would just be
Okay.
out of an operations.
Okay, so, all right, thank you so much.
Any other comments or questions about the budget? Ms. Pitko?
I just have a comment so you know where my head is at, even though I know I emailed some of this. Number 11, school allocation reduction, the $483,973. Although I'm sure no one at this board is happy that we're here right now having these conversations. As a teacher, having looked at my own school budget and understanding, I'm nervous that some of that 20% would fall on the backs of... Oh, no, but I'm talking about the different... You have 5 and 6. I'm talking about...
Look, right now we're at column 11.
Just 11. Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Mrs. Max Canelli?
Regarding the Math Academy, which I think we were all very enthusiastic about, the only question I had is that when we approved that in January, it was really based on concept. It was not, and the concept was very good, and we felt comfortable moving that forward, even in that stage. Is it possible to get more information now? And I'm comfortable with this number, but there was always that part of me that didn't understand how it could stay this number. That, for example, if you're pulling, for example, 2 children out of each of the 11 elementary schools for a class of 22, that's not necessarily going to reduce FTEs in those buildings, requiring a new FTE in the building where it is placed, and there is no FTE that I'm aware of that you're going to get for $9,500. So I was wondering if you could tell us more about where the program stands at this time.
Yeah, I think the presentation we did previously for the board is going to be, we've probably gotten done as much as we can without actually moving forward and making that commitment. And I say that because the money that's in the budget is really for summer work to compact the curriculum. That's really the expense. When we surveyed our parents about who would be interested in the program, we surveyed that from the premise that they would have to provide their own transportation. So that could be something the board, could change their mind on, but we had 70% of our parents surveyed that were interested in it, providing their own transportation. As far as whether or not it would add a teacher, detract a teacher, it's just like it is every year in elementary. You would just have one more classroom wherever we decided to place this program, and it would be a teacher that is already with us, an internal teacher, and then you watch where the numbers fall in September. And it's highly likely you take 2 students out of a section that it goes down a section. It's up and down across the district. We're looking at every elementary, every section, every August. So whether or not it's going to have a cost driver to it, it's not any different than any other classroom in the district.
Okay. Again, obviously, just that degree more uncertainty with that's not comfortable. I mean, again, I'm familiar with the curriculum work, so I appreciate that reminder, and also the reminder about the transportation, which I had forgotten about. So thank you for that. I just forgot my other follow-up question, but I know, Mr. Asa, you had your hand up. Oh,
Mr. Peterson?
Yeah, just to continue on the Math Academy. Since this is proposed for next year, have you come in on enrollment criteria, who you're going to allow into the program, the size of the program, or do we have enough to fill a full section?
Well, I think if you were asking Mr. Wakeman, and he is here tonight, he would say, please make a decision if you're going to do it, because the preliminary information he had to utilize to see how much interest there would be were based on, numbers from last year, the data from last year. Our kids are just finishing all of their assessments. He'll now have to do that analysis again and see with our current parents, how many are actually interested, because initially the survey had to say, if this had been an option for your child, going into 4th grade, would you have been interested, yes or no? If it were an option next year, would you be interested? And we got the feedback. So would this year's parents, knowing it's an actual program, how would they respond? It would literally be reaching out to every parent, but he can certainly talk about some of those qualifiers if you would like. He spent a great deal of time on this year.
I guess just, attached to that, I think I remember earlier in the year when we started talking about this, you had mentioned that you wouldn't do a section less than 15 for the Math Academy. What would happen in a situation where only 12 kids expressed interest, 12 families expressed interest? Do we hold off on doing it, or? From the staff perspective, if the demand is not there, we wouldn't be able to run the class. The demand would need to be there from the families. So we think, you would want to have a class full of children when you're looking at 11 different elementaries. So if the interest wasn't there, then we wouldn't be able to run the class.
Mrs. Greber?
Yeah, through the chair to Dr. Jones. Where will this be located? What school?
Because it's only one classroom, part of that is also what's happening with the other discussion we're having tonight. So, and I'm just going to give an example. So let's say the board says, we're not interested in Holland Hill and North Stratfield. Holland Hill has a lot of classrooms, that are open and unused. So it depends on all of these discussions fit together. You can't really make one in isolation. Some decision has to come first. And this is probably the easiest one, because right now we're talking about one classroom just to pilot the first year. The second year, it would be 2 classrooms if you were going to add the second.
Well, actually that was going to be my follow-up, because we are talking about 2 classrooms, right. Because, if we commit to this, we're going to be committing to it for 4th grade and 5th grade next year. So then we'd be talking about 2 classrooms in a building, and I'm assuming we would not want to have it in one building this year and then move it to another building next year. So and I guess too, we're not voting on the ECC tonight.
Right, this is my understanding, it's first read, so by the next meeting we would have direction. So if we knew that Math Academy was in the budget, the next thing we would need to do is see how many kids qualify, do we have families that are truly interested in enrolling next year, and be able to bring a site back to the board when we know what you're thinking about with facilities.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Asa?
I would like to ask a couple questions, if possible, if he could come up.
For Mr. Wakeman?
Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry, this microphone's really loud.
Walter Wakeman, Program Director for for pre-K through 5 math, science, and enrichment.
Sorry for putting you on the hot
No,
seat
not a
here,
problem.
but, so one of the questions I do have, following up to what Mr. Peterson said, was your initial survey, how many families did you reach out to?
We sent them to 75 addresses.
75. So does that, can you just explain how you, quickly in a summary of how you selected those 75 addresses?
I used the standardized measures that we use based on 3rd grade scores from last year for our current 4th grade students. And I took the top approximately 50 students. Actually, it was 40, just over 41 students. I believe it was 41 students. I'm just saying that off the top of my head. And we surveyed those families, and there were 75 contacts. We received 27 responses.
So can you explain 41 selected, 75 contacts? How?
Because there are multiple addresses to a student.
Okay.
Or multiple contacts per student.
Okay. So the actual number of students you selected was 41?
Correct.
Roughly? Right. Okay. And of those 41 students, how many responses did you get from families of those 41?
There were 27 total responses.
Okay. And of the 27, were you able to gauge how many would have participated if?
Yes, and I'm forgetting the exact number. Was it 17 or 19 that were in the affirmative, and somewhere around 8 or 9 that were not interested?
Okay, so
it's about a 70-30 split.
Okay. So my concern here is that we're talking about 17 kids in a district of almost 10,000. And I understand the initial push for this and what was about it. I was one of the members that was not in favor of moving forward with the exploration for many reasons. But I understood the majority of the board felt that we should. And I appreciate your time in doing so. But I am hesitant, based on those numbers, to spend $9,500 this year just for that summer work, to have so many unknowns. So to confirm, we would be talking, as Ms. Greber said, we would be talking in 2 classes eventually running consistently.
That's correct, and I would highly recommend they be in a single location. Just in the event there are 2 children who are siblings. Okay. Make it nearly impossible to drive across district to drop off 2 kids in 2 different locations.
Okay. And can you just give just maybe a couple bullet points on what will make these kids' daily curriculum and schedule different than their peers?
I'll start with the easy part of that. That is, all their other content areas will be similar to their peers on grade level. 4th grade will receive reading, writing, and science, social studies as peers. However, in the math, the curriculum will condense 4th grade plus some 5th grade content, so they'll be moving at a much quicker pace through that content. And 5th grade, they'll be moving through 5th and 6th grade content, so that the goal would be to be entering in grade 6 in the pre-algebra 7 math course.
Okay. I'm going to come back to this, but I'll let other board members speak.
Mr. Dyer, followed by Ms. Ticko.
I am a supporter of the Math Academy, if that's what we're going to call it. The Fairfield school system prides itself on having a comprehensive program, which means sometimes we have a class set up for 8 children because they need those extra resources. Sometimes we have a sports team that serves 24 students who are more engaged in our school system because they're participating in sports. We have high honors and AP classes in 5th year Chinese who speak to the needs of those particular students. And so if a math academy serves a dozen or two dozen students, and they are helped to achieve their goals in our school system, I think that's what a comprehensive education program is all about. If we were to go down to only if there's X number of students who are engaged, there would be some of our classes that have 15 or less students that we wouldn't run. And then we wouldn't be the quality district we are. I have full faith that the staff that we have will properly organize, run, and place this program within our facilities, and that's what their job is management. So I plan on supporting the $9,500 to be put in the $190 million budget to help advance this idea.
Ms. Picco.
I just have a follow-up question to Mr. Aces. The students outside of math, will they be moving as a group to different core subjects, or will they be included in the other classes in whatever school is chosen?
As it's currently designed, it would be self-contained classrooms.
Okay, so my concern of that is that for the past 2 decades or more, this district has worked towards inclusion, and that model being effective, being in a pure model. That's my hesitation for this program.
Ms. Jacobson.
Thank you. Through the chair to Dr. Jones, I have 2 questions on this. In pulling 2 students roughly per school for 4th grade next year, I'm curious if that ended up in your projections collapsing any 4th grade sections.
No, we have, the projections that are in the budget book are based on actual projections from Malone and McBroom.
Okay, so it didn't end up collapsing any of those, like they weren't one under one or one over, something like that.
This didn't have any impact. We didn't.
That didn't factor in.
No.
Right, okay. And then my second question is, well, not even a question, but just a comment is that I am excited about the opportunity to provide, more opportunity for more students. And I don't necessarily have a problem so much with the $9,500, but here is my concern, based on our next conversation. I'm counting classrooms. I'm counting utilization. I'm counting enrollment projections. And it is, the 2 classrooms do concern me. And I'm just wondering if, can we spend the same money, and maybe you guys have talked about this in executive sessions or whatnot, and maybe it's not possible, but is it not possible to build an advanced math program at the elementary school, at each elementary school, that would broaden the opportunity to more students and not take up 2 classrooms? Is that not, I understand that you're thinking of this really self-contained, much more inquiry, and they're just immersed in this all day long. I understand that. And I totally see the value in that. Have we thought about providing something of what I just described? Or is that not something that you felt would be good enough for the group of students that you're talking about here?
So we are working parallel to this idea in providing opportunities for all kids through our SRBI work, our intervention work. And when I mean intervention, I'm not just referring to intervention for students who may be struggling in mathematics, but also for students who may need additional supports in mathematics. And what does that look like to engage all kids and push all kids thinking forward? So that is work that is currently in process. It is not necessarily a separate program within each elementary school. There hasn't been worked on in that area yet. That would be significantly, that would have a different price tag, I'm sure. I'd have to look into that to give you any more.
And just a follow-up question, thank you so much. I think you understand what I'm trying to get at, right? Okay. The 41 students that qualified, what was the was that like a percentile score that you looked for in terms of that qualification, like 99th percentile on SBAC or something like that?
It does include, it's not just the 99th percentile. What I'm looking for is the overall performance of the student who will be able to handle that kind of ability and, of work, that type of compacting. I used our current students who are in our accelerated program already, who are in the grade 7 pre-algebra course, as a guideline on how to come up with some of these numbers. So it's less about the percentage as much, and more about the profile, if you will, of a student who would be successful in accelerating and being able to handle the coursework.
Okay, thanks so much for answering.
I would just follow up on that. Was there a breakdown by gender? Is it evenly?
I did do that. I also did it by ethnicity. I don't recall the gender breakdown. It was fairly evenly split. It did favor the boys. And from ethnicity, there was about 70-30 split in terms of white versus non-white.
I'm concerned about just ending up with a class of all, 10 boys and 5 girls, just in terms of their educational experience with the other factors that play into that.
That was not factored into the criteria for being successful in this course, but it is something that I did in my initial proposal put on the table that efforts would be made to try to make it gender equitable.
Any other questions? Mrs. Greber?
I'm sorry, it hasn't been that long, but I've already forgotten. When the student starts math in 6th grade, there's the options. You have math 6.
That's correct.
You have transition to pre-algebra, and there is a group, it's a small group, but a group that does go straight to pre-algebra.
That's correct. We currently have approximately 40 students in that.
So 40 students are already doing what the goal of this program is.
That's correct. It would not eliminate the option or possibility for other students to access that course sequence.
So I guess the question is, would you foresee then more students going straight to transition to pre-algebra, or?
That, excuse me, that's the ultimate goal. However, if you're pulling some students from other schools who may already be on track.
Right, I guess that, and I realize that it probably varies from year to year, but I guess, so the thought is that eventually that there would probably be an increase, while some of the students who this year in 6th grade are in pre-algebra, if we had had a math academy, they probably would have been in that math academy, so it's not as if we're going to be adding 20 additional
right, but
students.
The goal is to increase for students who are capable and ready for that when they arrive in 6th grade.
Okay, and then again, so then moving ahead to high school, they would be doing?
So these students would end up in geometry as 8th graders, and then they would begin Algebra 2 as an option as a freshman.
Okay, and then they would go to pre-calculus, calculus, and then multivariable calculus for senior year. And
that's if they follow that.
Right, and I understand that there are some other options with electives and whatnot, so that they might not necessarily take that, but they would have the ability to do that.
Correct.
And I guess through the chair to Dr. Jones, is that something, and I realize that this wouldn't be something that would happen right away, but would this possibly change any high school math staffing if there was an increase?
I don't think so, because really I think what it's doing is offering in 4th and 5th grade what we already do in middle school and high school, where we have classes that are basically, they really are tracking. I know people don't like to say that word, but where your algebra students are all together regardless how old they are in Algebra 1, and it happens all the way through high school. So I don't see it impacting that aspect going through high school.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Leeper?
I've obviously been clear about how I feel about the Math Academy, so I won't beat a dead horse, but I just want to thank you for all your work and encourage the board to think about the fact that we have families who are telling us that teachers, although they are incredible, cannot differentiate for every single student, and when you have outliers, and I think especially if you have outliers that might be beneficial to your testing data, it's easy to worry about them a little bit less. And if we can provide this opportunity for families to decide, and maybe they'll decide not to, and then we will have $9,500 coming back to the board. But at least we can give families the opportunity to decide whether or not this is a program they'd like to take advantage of, rather than us deciding for them. That's what I think would be best.
Mrs. Greber?
I guess one other question through the chair to Dr. Jones. So assuming that this stayed in, what would the timeline be moving forward? How would this work? Is there going to be a deadline for parents letting people know? When will the site be chosen? How will that all work? I'm just trying to get a sense, because it's almost the end of May, so.
Yeah, it would be very aggressive. We were just talking about that today. Mr. Wakeman, I don't know if you want to address that, but.
Sure, it would have to operate on 2 parallel tracks. One is sort of the logistics of it, that is the site, and Also communicating, once students are identified, communicating with families. This is, of course, is after SBA results are back. So that would be moving into the summer with confirmation during mid-July would be my goal, so that we could have things set up. On the back side of that would be the curriculum work that's happening, hiring a teacher for this particular role, and some more internal things that would need to happen simultaneously.
Okay. And then I guess just one more thing to follow up on that. So when would this site be chosen? Because while I am sure there are parents who would, regardless of where the school is located, but others perhaps if, let's just say for the sake of argument, North Stratfield was chosen. If you were a Mill Hill parent, you might think twice if you have other children who are going to be, at Mill Hill to try to get everyone across town. It might not be as appealing. So that could play a factor in a family's decision as to whether or not they would choose to do this program. If it's their child's school, I'm sure it would be a lot easier to make that decision, or if it's one elementary school over. So how will that information be available to parents as part of their decision-making process? Or are you going to say it's going to be somewhere and you're just going to have to trust us that it'll be a place that will work for you? And if that's the case, what if someone commits and then they find out where it is and they back out? How is that? It would just seem like it could create a lot of work.
Right. Somebody had mentioned the short timeline here. I'm hoping that the board makes some decisions about some other things so that we can make a decision. There are a number of decisions that have to fall into place, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, in terms of the Math Academy and location, the ECC program and location. So there are other things to be considered. I'm just putting that out there. I would certainly love to be able to communicate to families at the time of notification, this is the location. But there are other factors that need to be considered first.
Did you do is there one school that's more highly represented from the group of students that expressed an interest?
So it is different year to year by school, and I'm using as a guide the gifted identification process. We see that fluctuates in schools from year to year, and I anticipate that the same thing will happen with students who are identified in the Math Academy. So it may favor one school in one particular year and another school in another year. So I'm not sure that school location based on that is something that I would take into consideration at this time.
Mrs. Max Canelli.
Just for the sake of moving the conversation along, I just want to indicate why I support the 9,500, because regardless of whether we end up doing a Math Academy, or actually we talk about doing that, the district decides, you know what, exactly to Mrs. Gerber's point, once they hear the location, for whatever reason, the numbers are dropping. I want a Math Academy, whether it is centralized or whether we decide, no, we're going to develop, so regardless the curriculum needs to be developed, I don't want this 9,500 back. I want it spent on developing this advanced elementary school curriculum to fulfill the needs for students I really don't believe are being met at this time. So I want the curriculum developed regardless. If we do it centralized, I love the idea of that. If we don't, then I do want our math teachers within the elementary schools working on a curriculum where if there's, I'm just making this up, if all fourth graders are doing their math at the same time, they get pulled out for advanced math in that model. And that's something delivered by the math teacher who's already designated within each building. But regardless, the 9,500 needs to be spent to make that curriculum, and so I support this as a budget item. I don't want to get too sidetracked here with the curriculum discussion. We have to keep it focused on budget, and I want the 9,500 staying. I would like to bring up another item, but I don't know if somebody else needs to ask a question about the Math Academy, because otherwise I'd wanted to ask about the high school FTEs.
Just to follow up to that, I somewhat disagree with what you're saying in that we are talking about this as $9,500 for curriculum development, but it is specifically for the Math Academy as described. So the idea that people back out and we don't have enough people to move forward, and then all of a sudden we're going to re-queue this money to do it at an 11 school-wide system, I just don't buy. I don't see that happening. I see your intent, and I don't disagree with it, because I would rather see something at the wider spectrum, but I think that's pie in the sky, thinking that $9,500 is going to do what you're saying.
I disagree. It's the curriculum that's going to be delivered in one setting or in multiple settings, but I'm just indicating my support for, unless people are going to talk about cutting this, I personally would like to move on to other items, but that's because I have other questions.
Mr. Peterson, do you have a last question on the Math Academy?
Well, last question.
comment?
I guess that's a question for you in terms of, we were talking about a curriculum that integrates math into other academic areas so that it's kind of permeates the whole student day, which is different than a proposal that might increase the leveling options at elementary school. And so I guess I agree with Mr. Asa on that point, and I guess my fundamental question is this something that if we pass on the Math Academy now, is there a move to increase that leveling, that sense of leveling options, when the math curriculum is scheduled to come up for review in this coming school year?
We will be looking at the review. There is a recognition that we do want to challenge all of our students across the schools, regardless of the Math Academy, and make that available to them. In terms of leveling, that's going to come through the review process as we look at the curriculum and what are the broader needs across the district.
Mrs. Gerber?
Well, I guess through the chair to Mr. Wakeman. So if, let's say, we approve or keep it in the budget and it ends up not coming to fruition because not enough students sign up, would there be something you'd be able to do with the $9,500?
I certainly would be able to make good use of it.
But anything specific? I guess just go to Mrs. Maxon Canelli's, right, thing with the $9,500, putting it towards something.
Yeah. So just by way of example, providing students with experiences with our base 10 system, providing them with exploring alternative bases may be something that we could extend students' thinking simultaneously, where they'll be dealing with the same concepts, but they would be actually thinking about it in a deeper sense, the structure of our number system. That's just one example, but it's those kind of things that we would like to develop in parallel with what we currently have, and or finding things that are on the market. There are many more things because of the Common Core that are becoming available on the market for free that we can also take advantage of. So I was utilizing some of those resources, but there has been some thought. I have been talking with the math science teachers about this and moving in that direction regardless. Again, it's in support of the SRBI process that we're working on, and how are we challenging some of our higher need kids, our students who need this challenge.
Okay, thank you.
I still have some concerns about the cost and the unknown. While it may not lead to an increased FTE, we don't necessarily know.
Right, you would never know with this academy from year to year. It'll be just like any other classroom. So you couldn't make a long-term commitment unless you wanted to say we're definitely going to invest in FTE, and then you could possibly be reducing a teacher in another elementary because you don't have a classroom for them.
Okay, I will move on to any other budget questions.
Not on this.
Not on this. Not on the math. Moving on from the Math Academy right now. Mrs. Max Canelli.
It's just through the chair to Dr. Jones. The 2.8 FTEs at the high school. In what departments are those? In other words, where is it that we're saying students will be put into study halls if those hires aren't made?
I don't know that it's necessarily just into study halls. Ms. Deasy, do you have the actual 2.8 list, or if the high school headmasters have that list? I can tell you 1.0 chemistry means students wouldn't take chemistry, so they would have to take something else. Do you have that list?
We had unexpected people sign up for chemistry?
We have a higher enrollment, yes.
So it's a 1.0 in health for a 0.5 at each high school, a 0.5 in chemistry, that's just at Ludlow, 0.4 in business, and that's split equally between the two schools, 0.2 in music, only at Fairfield Ludlow. Ludlow's going down, 0.2 in art, it's 0.8 in tech ed, and then with some shifts, ultimately a 0.1 in family consumer science.
Okay, and so the chemistry obviously is not something I feel like touching, but the others, in fact, that is the feeling that because it's not that we could easily shift them into obviously my interest here is
couldn't some of these couldn't something here be saved so that students could be shifted into under-enrolled classes? They all list backups, so and again, not chemistry, but that's the idea, the gist of my question.
What I can tell you, and go ahead, Mr. Hetz, it's Mr. Ebling, but we run them through the drill of looking at every section, every class, and we would not have this on here if we didn't feel like it was really needed. Go ahead, Mr. Hetz.
Just to address the chemistry real quickly, as you remember, this current school year is the year that we implemented biology for all ninth graders, and then the prior year, many ninth graders were in earth science, so we have 10th graders in biology. So that bubble is moving up into chemistry. So we're not, although we handled all of those shifts internally last year because we have many teachers whose primary area is not biology but are certified in biology and are therefore teaching those areas. We don't have many people who are additionally certified in chemistry, so to take on that bubble of students, we need to, that's where that 0.5 is coming from. In terms of your question just a second ago about those areas tend to be elective, most of those are elective areas, that those small numbers are business, tech ed, FCS. All the other sections in those areas are full, which is, in fact, we're probably, even with those FTE increases, probably turning some students away from being able to take those courses where they would, especially, they'd be underclassmen most likely as we prioritize for the seniors, but they would have additional time throughout high school to be able to take those classes. Generally, when students sign up for a culinary class, just moving them into an art class, really doesn't fit with maybe their own personal plan or preferences, and we have always tended to build our schedule based on, student preferences. That doesn't preclude the counselors from often meeting with the students to offer them alternatives to say, we weren't able to get you into that art class, but look, there's a graphic design class which maybe you could utilize your artistic talents, and so they talk about those options with kids and, and do try to fill those, maybe slightly under-enrolled courses as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I didn't know if Mr. Ebling was going to add anything or if
I was just going to comment on the student preference. That's how we design most of our schedule around what students are interested in and what they've selected under the elective areas. So we are put through our paces from central office on those numbers, and we do, for instance, in something like family and consumer science, where we have fashion and design 1, and then we have fashion and design 2, 3, and 4. We're often combining some of those upper levels and the teachers differentiating within that class depending on the years that the students has been in the class. So we've done our best job as we could with those.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Pickup.
This is a personal preference, but I would like to hold off a year on the 6th grade Chromebooks while we get more extensive research on how the 7th through 12th grade Chromebooks have been rolled out, how the teachers have been using them, the amount of time the students are on them all day long. That's just my preference. I don't know if anybody shares it. I know I said it during budget season.
Mr. Dwyer?
I'm just wondering to move this conversation along as to whether the board would, and I would make a motion to clarify the existing motion to state that we are talking about column 11, and then perhaps board members, whether it's Chromebooks or Math Academy or something else, a board member could specifically bring forward that idea as to where to take that expense off and where to adjust for it someplace else, just so that we can move it along and we know exactly what column we're adjusting. So if you'll accept that kind of a approach, then I would move that forward.
So right now, to amend the recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the superintendent recommended budget adjustments for 2019-2020 as
enclosed
as represented by column 11, alternate adjustments as enclosed.
Couldn't have said it better.
Thank you.
So I make that motion.
Second? Mr. Mr. Peterson?
Don't we already have a motion on the
right,
table?
well,
What do we
This is
have?
an amendment. This is an
Amended.
amendment to the
Amended.
motion.
Mr. Peterson seconds. Going to the public on the amended motion? Seeing none. All in favor? Ms. Leeper, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Vitale, Mr. Asa, Ms. Jacobson, just to clarify the language.
We're just clarifying language.
Yeah.
No, we're going to, just to clarify the language. Ms. Pitko, it's unanimous. Okay. All right, back to the board. Just if any board members have any adjustments that they would like to make, amendments to column 11, now is the time. Mr. Peterson?
I would like to amend the motion to eliminate the Math Academy, although frankly, I don't know exactly what language we should use for that.
And in the alternative,
And with the alternative of reducing the school allocation reduction on line 11.
Do you have a second? Mr. Asa? Any further discussion on that, on the motion?
and to clarify, the 180, 117 would be increased by 9,500 or decreased? Which way is that math working?
It would be decreased to
Decreased, correct.
give you a number.
Thank you.
So 180, 112 minus 9,500 would be 170, 612.
Going to the public, would any members of the public like to speak to this? Seeing none, back to the board. All in favor of the recommended adjustment, which removes 9,500 for the Math Academy and increases or decreases the amount of the allocation reduction to 17612. All in favor? Ms. Pitko, Mr. Asa, Mr. Peterson, all opposed? Ms. Leeper, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Greber, Mrs. Vitale, Mrs. Canelli. Motion fails. But Ms. Jacobson, I'm sorry, I missed you. 3-6. Any other amendments? Okay, back to the main motion. That the Board of Education approve the superintendent recommended budget adjustments for 2010.
Comment on the main,
What?
main motion.
No, thank you. Public comment on the main motion? Seeing none, back to the board. On the main motion, all in favor?
Are we still?
I asked if there was any other adjustments. Do we have any other adjustments? Sorry.
Sorry, I was talking.
Mrs. Canelli, do you have any other adjustments you would like to make? Anybody?
Fine.
Right.
No, I don't have a way to do a calculator here, so I make a motion to remove line 25, sixth grade Chromebooks, $206,006. If somebody wants to do the math, my phone's dead.
That's not in column 11.
Okay. I'm trying to keep up here.
But it's 7.
Adding it as a reduction.
Adding it as a reduction.
Putting it, and do you have, where would you like the offset today?
In column 11, row 11, school allocation reduction.
You still have money left over.
But yeah, it's, the Chromebooks is,
Roughly 30,000 left over. Not exact math, but roughly.
I was not prepared for that. Adding the 2 sheds back in for maintenance, which leaves you 20,000.
For the purpose of maybe getting the motion up, maybe the motion would say, in the balance would go into major maintenance projects, because we always need money in maintenance.
Thank you,
That
Mr.
might be a
Dwyer.
way for you to get the math.
So 20, eight, 9. So the motion is to bring school allocation reduction to 0, decrease sixth grade Chromebooks, 206,606, with the remainder, 25,894, going to major maintenance.
The sheds, you forgot the sheds.
Oh, and $10,000. 15,000 to major maintenance, and 15,894 major maintenance, and 10,000 to the 2 sheds.
Thank you.
Do I have a second? Ms. Jacobson? Discussion? Dr. Jones?
Just as a reminder to the board, you did receive a letter from all 3 of our middle school principals. None of our middle school principals, who are the instructional leaders for our district, and I think have the highest regard from everybody sitting up here, support removing them, because we feel like instructionally it's making an incredible difference in being able to teach in a 21st century way, and we see that expanding to 6th grade on all the wonderful things that we've seen in 7th grade this year. You also received a letter from the Roger Ludlow Middle School PTA, I believe today or yesterday, where their PTA doesn't support it. They don't support a removal. They want to see it funded, and truly, I feel like if you looked at the testing example that we sent, I think the team at the middle school did a fantastic job sending you so many examples and links of the lessons, and the work that's happening in all 3 of our middle schools is phenomenal, and what our children are being asked to do from an assessment standpoint and a technological standpoint, it's almost malpractice from an educator standpoint to not be able to prepare our children for those assessments. And they don't have the devices in the buildings. If you're asking to go back to a cart model, then we would need this money for carts and more money, because we don't have the carts. So if you want to hear from some middle school staff, I think it would be really helpful before you make a decision on this.
Mr. Peterson?
Thank you. I did receive the letters. I have given a lot of thought to them. I have a middle schooler and a high schooler. And in talking with a lot of parents of middle schoolers, I have formed a somewhat different opinion about the helpfulness of Chromebooks than what was talked about. And I've come a long way on this. I did not oppose the Chromebooks when they came up last year. But I have found, while my high schooler and other high school parents have talked about how helpful they are, and it's kind of a natural evolution, middle school parents have not been so uniform as you make it sound. I've gotten a lot of complaints. I have heard from a lot of parents that it is a distraction. I had to complain myself to Anthony Formato about the fact that these were being used in class for chatting purposes, and I asked them to shut down a particular extension on the Chrome browser, Google Chat, which my son was at home doing homework, and he would be getting pinged from his friends at a time that he was trying to concentrate on his work. I think in an age gap, an age grouping that kids are having a difficult time with focus, having a difficult time with organization, adding another screen for a large portion of their lives is something that we should look at more cautiously. And I think that it's not inappropriate to delay, at least, moving 6th grade up to giving 6th grade Chromebook access to take home for a year to evaluate what the impact has been of this program on our 7th graders, especially relating to outcomes. We have heard a lot from teachers about the very excited, the administration is very excited, and all of that's great. I would be very interested in metrics about outcomes. And I don't know that we have that data yet, and I think that it would not be malpractice in any way to hold off a year and evaluate what the impact of this program has been.
Dr. Jones?
Yeah, and I do respect your opinion, Mr. Peterson, and I'm speaking from an educator point of view when I talk about malpractice, because we truly believe that we do want to prepare our children for the world that they're going into, and it starts in 6th grade, it starts in 3rd grade, and we try to be very responsible to developmental levels, and I think part of that does come, back to trusting the staff. If it's an issue of taking them home, I think that's a very different discussion. But if this money is not in the budget, we can't have the discussion about whether they're going home or giving the parents the option that want to take them home for our families that don't have access, and especially for the equity aspect. It is enormous, and not all of our families, have access at home. They simply don't. And if it's about giving choice to the families, I know our middle school principals would rather work with the board on that than to completely cut it out so that we can't continue growing in 21st century instruction.
I appreciate that. And I want to backtrack a little bit on my tone, because it's an issue that I feel very personally. I certainly have no sense that you are attempting to do anything nefarious, and I don't want to leave that impression. So if I left that impression, I am sorry. And I do respect the input of staff, but I also respect the input of parents, and that's where I'm coming from, and that's where I've gotten a lot of feedback on this particular issue.
Mr. Dwyer?
Ms. Pitko probably recognizes that this is not a motion that I'll be supporting, even though I was helpful perhaps in getting it on the table so it could be discussed. I accept the PTA's representation that the parents in the overall basis, not that every parent, but parents as a group support this, our educators support this, and we have to advance the use of technology in education. The world is heading in that direction. This is just a step in that direction. So I won't be supporting this motion, but I just wanted to clarify that.
Mr. Asa?
I would echo what Mr. Dwyer said with some regards, but one thing I do hope that we can look at is something that Mr. Peterson has brought up, and I have heard from parents. I mean, I have young kids, so nowhere near middle school, but I've heard from a lot of families concerns about the lack of, I don't know what you want to call it, spyware or whatever from the district, of being able to shut things off and keep things under control. And I would really urge, I know we've talked about this at previous meetings with our IT director, and it was kind of left that there wasn't necessarily a firm thing in place, but there was times when they could intervene, if I'm correct. But I don't believe that there's necessarily an actual software or program that's on there being utilized fully. So I'm curious if anyone through Dr. Jones can answer that.
I know Mr. Honahan is here tonight, but I'm going to quickly answer that. I think that for most of our middle schoolers, if they have this device, it's one of the few devices they have, probably the only, that is monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I will say probably, I was in this discussion today where probably one of the greatest benefits we've seen of going one-to-one this year that we never have before is our kids who are in crisis that are actually writing a note that could be suicidal, and I talked about this at the RTM. We immediately get an alert if it's at midnight, if it's at 8 in the morning. We're calling families. It's incredible. The monitoring system is very tight. There are things in the first year for a district like us when you roll out. It's a big change to instruction. There are things to learn, and you have to learn what do you want to blacklist, what's whitelisted, and what that means is what's allowed, what's not. We're very fortunate in that we've been able to learn from a lot of our peers, and there are things we knew to blacklist right away because colleagues around the state said this just doesn't work. Like the chat aspect, we respect hearing from parents, and when somebody brings an issue to us, we're taking care of it. And we're being responsive to that when we hear from parents. We're hoping that we've already got things turned off. But there are things that are gonna creep up, and there's new software that comes out, every year. But we try to be vigilant about what we allow and what we don't. So I just want to reassure you, the monitoring level is some of the best you'll see in the country. In that there are a whole team of us at central office that keep our children safe, literally 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Okay, thank you for that, and I hope that we continue to evolve and do that and be very diligent about not allowing distractions, like Mr. Peterson said, those types of things, but thank you.
Ms. Jacobson?
Couple things on this. I would definitely echo some of the things that Mr. Peterson expressed his concerns on. That being said, I would hope that my middle school administrators don't doubt my support for them and respect in supporting this concept, because I, for one, have for a very long time, even before getting on this board, gone after the issue with our schools constantly being asked to give back money. Constantly. Freezing money, being asked to give back money, so leaving in money after saying it's more than after they gave back the 10%. That doesn't make me feel better. This is not just about supplies, materials, the icing, it's our plays, it's our extra intramural sports, it are the things that are meaningful to our students. So this is not about my disrespect for the PTA or about my lack of appreciation for what our state team have sent to us. This is about me, that I'm always going to fight these reductions.
I think it might be helpful to have our middle school leadership team just come up and just speak to the allocation and any other concerns that were voiced by board members. Thank you. Just please state your name for the record.
Hi, good evening. It's Gary Rosato. I'm the principal at Fairfield Woods. Going to a point of data, this is the time of year where we're all involved in end-of-year conferences with teachers. And the 7th grade teachers in particular took this challenge on very seriously. And all of them created teacher goals focused on the use of Chromebooks. It's been very exciting to watch how they've utilized them in the classroom. But these end-of-year conferences that I've been having with them are equally exciting. Every one of them have come with their Chromebook and examples of student projects and exhibitions that they have done, which they had not done in previous years. And for me, the most exciting piece has been some of our more veteran and, if you will, traditional teachers who were shying away a little bit from this new technology. They are won over and very excited about it. Today we had a faculty meeting, and we were talking about the rollout next year and what that might look like. I did mention that we were coming tonight. They were very clear to me, the teachers, that they would like to have these in the 6th grade and in the 8th grade next year. Without question, the students are very excited. At Woods, they carry them around. They have those beautiful blue cases. They take great care of them. I checked the maintenance statistics with our library staff. We've had very little breakage. Kids are very responsible. So from that perspective, I would say it's been a huge success at Woods. So, you know, I have more to say about that, but I'll give my colleagues a chance. But just seeing it on the ground every day has been very, very invigorating for the school and for the instruction.
Anthony Formato from Tomlinson. I too have seen an invigoration in the staff, and with that you see increased instruction and the level of challenge that we're putting forth to the kids. At Tomlinson specifically, we have students who don't have access at home, and this has definitely leveled the playing field for many students that you may not think of that do have need. And there are only maybe one computer in the house, and now there's another computer that students can actually do their homework. We've also given out hotspots to families in need so they can access the internet using Wi-Fi. And that's something that maybe you haven't considered before too. So we do have families in need. This does level the playing field. I do support it very highly. My teachers, who I have a few here tonight, that are dedicated to this, dedicated to the initiative, dedicated to the work that's already been done, and all of the work that the teachers have done collaboratively. They are very excited about this. That does translate to better teaching, which translates to results and better scores. Thank you.
Hi, Meg Tiley, principal here at Roger Ludlow Middle. I want to echo what my colleagues have said, and I just would like to add, because I think some of the misconception that we have out in the public within our 7th grade Chromebook use is that if you were to walk into a 7th grade class, you'd see kids behind a Chromebook, and that is not the case. We are really looking to find a balanced approach in pen to paper, along with using technology, and those spontaneous moments where that teachable moment happens and you can utilize technology in the moment. I'd also like to add that while we're talking about it happening in 7th grade, I have our library media specialist here and one of our 6th grade teachers here. I know Tomlinson and Woods also have teachers representing. When we did this rollout with 7th grade, we did not just target 7th grade teachers. We were really looking to the future and all of our professional development, not only before this initiative officially rolled out, but throughout this year. We have really focused on how teachers are utilizing technology and perhaps changing their instruction using technology. Again, a balanced approach to that. I just would like to use that, one of the examples that Dr. Rosado mentioned, in my end of the year goal meeting with Senora Shore. Prior to that meeting, she sent me video clips of students from the beginning of their year in 6th grade Spanish, because she utilized technology, to where they are in their benchmark at the end of the year. I am looking at students on a screen at the beginning of the year, and they see this themselves, where they started at the beginning of the year, where they are in the winter. This was a fall to spring, but wow, it spoke volumes to me on where the kids progressed, how her teaching progressed with those students, and that was all used through technology. And I can only speak, if I were a student looking at myself speaking Spanish, I would be pretty darn proud of my work through the use of technology.
Tom Hanian, Executive Director of Digital Learning. I also have an incoming 5th grade. And one of the things I think is nice about having a deployment for an entire grade is through our Google Apps dashboard, we can throttle what students are able to access and do. So specific with what we're saying with Mr. Peterson, we were able to turn off a resource for an entire grade band. So we can throttle different experiences for different children. So I think that was a great suggestion that we came up and we were able to do that. So that's another thing we can kind of consider as we move forward of how do we have children exposed to different levels even with YouTube settings as well. That's another thing that we're considering of bringing down some more strict settings as the age groups go through all the way up through high school.
Thank you. Oh, it's Ms. Picco, sorry.
I just wanted to reiterate that I made this motion to delay spending this money for a year because we had not gotten extensive research on how they were being used specifically. I have my own personal experience in my own district on a one-on-one initiative, and I have a kindergartner who's on screen time an awful lot. So my concern comes out of that.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for our middle school principals? Thank you. Any more discussion on the amendment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the public to speak on the amendment only.
Stage prop. Hello, dear board members. I feel uniquely qualified to...
Oh, sorry, name and address for the record.
Excuse me, my name is Christine McMaster-Sander. I live at 130 Rygate Road. I feel uniquely qualified to ask for support for the Chromebooks in our classroom, as this year I am the parent of a 7th grade son at Roger Ludlow Middle School, and I happen to also teach math at Tomlinson Middle School. One little thing, I sent you a letter. I think you may have had my letter forwarded to you. Some highlights from my letter, so I won't take too much time. In the past, when things were issued at school, they would come home, and depending on what kind of computer I had, what kind of browsers we were familiar with at home, things sometimes worked and sometimes they didn't. So as a parent, I would find myself reconfiguring our home computer to make use of what we had to then be able to complete assignments at home. My daughter is also a graduate of Fairfield Ludlow High School. She's currently attending Tufts. She's had a fabulous Fairfield education. And I've struggled with this technology home bridge for quite some time. This year, it's been an absolute dream. My son starts assignments in class. He doesn't finish them. He comes home. He finishes them. The ClassLink platform saves his usernames, saves his passwords. So everything has been so seamless. So it's very easy to help him in a very specific amount of time, because he's a busy kid, like a lot of Fairfield kids. Plays instruments. He utilizes a lot of the assets of our district. I also teach the sixth graders you were talking about, the accelerated sixth graders, and I had to provide them in-class Chromebooks that they only used in my class. So they were at a slight disadvantage from their seventh grade peers while in my class because they didn't have their own Chromebooks like my seventh graders did. So I'm really hoping that we find the money to continue to fund this program for both 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And yes, with any rollout of any new program, we are all learning along the way. But as a teacher and a member of our school society and a parent member of our society, I'm super excited to join this 21st educational system and provide what I've seen my own son's computer skills quadruple since he's had this opportunity. And we have had computers at home, but this is his device. It's personalized, he enjoys using it, and it's been a wonderful opportunity. So I thank you very much for giving that to us.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name's Nikki Callahan. I am resident of Fairfield, and all three of my kids went through the Fairfield Public School system. I'm a library media specialist here at Roger Ludlow Middle School. I'm also the liaison for the Library Media and Tech Integrator Department, K-8. So I'd like to really advocate. We were the department that spent an awful lot of time rolling out these devices, including giving PD to teachers. Despite giving every single 7th grader a Chromebook, our labs and our carts were still absolutely packed this year. We're still turning away teachers from labs and from carts. So I'd like to reiterate a point Dr. Jones brought up that I think is really crucial. And that is, if we don't roll this out to 7th grade, what is the cost to update the carts and the labs? Because 6th graders are going to be using technology. That's not going away. So I'm not sure if that was added into the budget, because those carts need updating and those labs need updating. So I think that cost will be incrementally higher than giving every 6th grader a Chromebook. So I just want you to really think about that, because the 6th graders aren't not going to be using technology next year. It's just how and the cost of that. If there's any instructional questions, I'm happy to answer that. I work with students every single day using technology in our middle school. Thanks.
Any more members of the public? Okay.
Hi, I'm Peggy Shore, and I am a teacher at Roger Ludlow Middle School. I teach grade 6 through 12. I was at Ward for a number of years. This year I taught 6th grade and 9th grade. The unique thing about teaching the 6th grade this year and the 9th graders is that the 9th graders were my 6th graders the first year of our new curriculum, which anytime I get a chance to thank you for your vision in helping us develop and put that curriculum in place, I will do that. So I thank you. While that curriculum is progressive, it is visionary, it is working, I can't say enough great things. You've heard all of this. You've heard other teachers say this. The curriculum is not dependent on technology, but it is dependent on using authentic materials. And in that respect, we need to bring the outside world, in a limited way, into the classroom. The Google Suite does that for us. as you talked about, the security, it is a closed, open network, is the only way I can think about it. But students have, it is not that we are needing to have Chromebooks every single day because that's what they're going to do every single day, is deal with or have a Chromebook. But stuff comes up, and we already know the research about connecting language to visuals, bringing the outside world in and making things real to students who are learning language. As a language teacher, I have 110 students. The Chromebooks are for all sixth graders. I can only speak to how I can see when we have those Chromebooks, and I have to beg for them, because I have to beg for any technology that we have at our school. And I don't really think that's how this should be in 2019, is just kind of getting whatever anybody has left over, could we please use that? It does not help the planning go smoothly. It interrupts learning. It's not as because we feel like having Chromebooks and think that's going to be cool. If we didn't need them, I don't think we would be asking for them. There's a lot of research out there supporting one-to-one. I don't need to tell you what that is. I'm just here to ask you to support the world language curriculum that you guys helped put in place.
I'm
Without
sorry,
this, we're done.
thank you, your time, thank you. Okay, seeing no members of the public, back to the board. Okay, please.
Okay. The amendment is to remove line 25, column 11, $206,006 for Chromebooks, and to, I'm trying to think for the right word, to balance, to, what would be the?
Appropriate one.
To reallocate the funds, $15,894 for major maintenance, $180,112 for allocation, $10,000 for the athletic sheds.
All in favor? Ms. Pitko? Mrs. Jacobson? Mr. Peterson? All opposed? Ms. Sleeper? Mr. Dwyer? Mrs. Greber? Mrs. Vitale? Mr. Asa? Mrs. Maxine Canelli? Motion fails. Back to the main motion. Any more amendments? Back to the main motion.
Public comment.
Public comment on the main motion. Seeing none, back to the board, back to the main motion. All in favor? Ms. Sleeper, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Greber, Mrs. Vitale. The main motion. Mrs. Maxine Canelli and Mr. Peterson. All opposed? Ms. Pitko, Mr. Asa, Mrs. Jacobson. 6-3. Motion passes. Thank you to those staff members who came and gave comment. Okay, moving on to new business. First reading of ECC site for 2020. We have a handout at our seats, and I'll let Dr. Jones kind of talk us through this.
There really isn't anything new in here that you haven't seen before as we've been presenting all year. I just thought pulling some of the different slides back together. Number one, for the public, just to hear some of the discussion that we've had this whole school year. On the first page, it's just a reminder of why we're even having this discussion. I don't think it's because anybody really wants to have it. It's the rapidly outgrown ECC school site, and preschool is required by federal law Our current ECC site was built for 84 students, and if you go back to 2009-10, I know there's at least one board member who was talking about they were in the ECC when it was smaller. Used to have 75, 71, as high as 165. Right now, we have 172 pre-enrolled for next year. So that's just a reminder of what's happening with kind of some exponential growth. On the next page, this work started in September, and there are several actually presentations that are online. They're posted on the website if anybody wants to go back and review any of those. And on March 12th, we came to the board to present the facilities rubric, and this was really looking at if we have to utilize one of our existing schools for some of our classrooms. Right now, we're in our second year of Stratfield. The board had asked staff to go and look at other school sites, where there's sites that perhaps could be better. We applied a facilities rubric, did on-site, visits, studied the maps of the buildings, talked to principals, and we looked at things like, one of the things that's listed here, how many restrooms? And that's important in an elementary school because if we are going to need the restrooms for pre-K, we would like to still have restrooms in the building for kindergarten. That's ideal for a kindergarten program. Doesn't mean that's essential, but if you can do it, it's better to be able to do it. So that's just a reminder of what you saw in the facilities rubric. We also looked at drop-off and pickup. Does the building already have HVAC in the building? Is there either pre-K space that's already there, pre-K space where we could put it? How move-in ready is the building? Is it going to take a couple $1 million, or is it, a very either low cost or no cost, other than just physically moving things? The number of classrooms with restrooms, and then whether it had elevators, steps, multiple floors. Below that, we came back to you after we did the facilities rubric and brought the programming rubric back to the board, because you can't just look at the school facility. You need to understand what programs are in our buildings. And some of our buildings already have some unique programming in place. And this was where you were looking at utilization. You can also see when it says least disruption, which is that column 3, just as a reminder, would you have to move a lot of children out of the building right now? For instance, Sherman was a good facilities. On the facilities rubric, it's going to have 7 restrooms, but that building is full. It's over capacity, so that's not an option. On the far right-hand side, just as a reminder, the unique programming, we have CLCs in some of our buildings. You really would not want to have an ECC program and a CLC program. So would it mean relocating a CLC program out of that building? And it's desirable from our executive director of special ed that we not move our CLC programs. And we believe our principals would say the same thing, because when you have a CLC in an elementary, especially, it takes a lot of skill on the entire staff to really work to have a strong CLC. So those are the unique programs that are at the buildings that also was a factor in deciding. Then on page 3, just as a reminder, you've seen this map, I think, the last 2 times. It's the building utilization, where the buildings are sitting right now. Below that was a proposed timeline, again, based on what the board asked us to do. When you look down on the bottom, you can see kind of what the capacity is of the CLC. I don't think that calculation was on there last time on the slide, but it will be on for the Board of Selectmen tomorrow. On the next page, you see the projected building utilization. If you were to take Holland Hill and also North Stratfield. Did I say that right? Yes, sorry. But again, this is not a new slide. The program goals, which are down on the bottom, it's just a reminder, more than anything, we think programmatically next year, again, we're making this decision because we have to, we're out of space. But the other thing that's been happening is we have not been able to have the program aspect that we want for ECC. We want class sizes of 15, not 18 and 20. Next year we're at 11.3, and just remember I said we don't have 0.3 of a child, but some classrooms are 11, some are 12. We want to increase our peer-to-peer ratio, and we would like to start at least at 50-50, trying to be a minimum of 60 and 40, and that means 60 children without special needs and 40% with special needs. But again, we want to start at 50-50, which is what we're doing next year. And as a reminder, one of the reasons, again, we're looking at the programming aspect is this year our peer ratio in October was at 27, and in April it was down to 23. So as we progress through the year, it gets more challenging. We want to have balanced English language learners across our pre-K sites, to see if we can improve our kindergarten transition. Do we have seats available for growth? So we've tried to look at that. And then looking at the feeder pattern transition, that is not so much important tonight, but if you're looking at those two specific sites, it would be. And then the last thing is really just looking at the pre-K through 12 focus and utilization. Looking at, to resolve overcrowding at Ward, basically we need to move about 172 children as of next year if you're looking at 2020 and you're not utilizing the existing ECC site. We need those seats out in our schools, 11 elementaries. Just as a reminder for Ward, they are a building that's built for 1,400. They're currently at 1,479, so they are over capacity. Ward could reclaim that space. But if you go out to the 10-year, Ward is projected to come back down, but I will, just as a reminder, I think you probably need another year or two of that trend, because this year our high schools were higher than they were projected to be on the 10-year. We still have to use the 10-year number until we do a new 10-year, but we need to see how many of our 8th graders we retain again, and is that going to be a new normal for us? But that's just, again, this is information you've heard before. I just wanted to remind you kind of from many different presentations we've done this year. And then you also have at your seat, these are questions that came to us pretty much Friday, Saturday, and then late this afternoon. So I realize some of you may not have even read the email. It was sent, I think, at 5:25. But again, we got the bulk of this was late today, but we had most of it answered in previous presentations, but there's a lot of information on here.
Thank you for the recap. Mr. Asa?
Yeah, just on the page 5 of the presentation here, where it says 172 children. Can you just remind me, I apologize for asking this question again, but the 172 is not 172 at one time, right? That includes 172, but half of them are their some of them are their half day, right? So there's not 172 at one time, right? Just trying to figure out when we're talking about number of seats that we need at schools and number of classrooms, I think there may be some misconceptions out there that we actually need 172 seats every day, all day.
All right. Rob Mancusi, Executive Director, Special Education and Special Programs. That 172 students represents actual bodies right now that we're projecting to begin the 1920 school year. There are 8 classrooms, 16 sessions, so there's AM sessions and PM sessions, and then in addition to that, there's 2 CLCs. But those are actually 172 students that we are planning on coming at this time.
So normally with 100 okay, so
so each section has a capacity of 15. So that's 15 times 16 sessions. Like Dr. Jones said, our goal is a 50-50 split of students with disabilities to non-disabled peers. And right now, we're going to keep it a minimum of 60-40, which is much better than our current 20-something% for this year.
Do you mind if I add to that? I just wanted to say, we've had a whole team of people, most of them are sitting over there, that really it's placing every individual child, because one child may be there for 2 sessions, and some are only there for AM or PM, so it literally is placing the students so that we know how many seats are available for peers and how many are available for special needs.
So the bottom line is 8 classrooms.
It's 10 classrooms this year, with 2 of those being CLC.
Okay.
Yeah, but sometimes it's 1 CLC, some years it's 2. This year it's 2.
Mrs. Greber?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on one thing. So this 172 at the beginning of the year is considerably higher than what it was at the beginning of this year, but that's because adds the pre-K from Burr.
This is actually children who are pre-enrolled for this program for ECC starting in September. It's our peers, and it's because we may have children at Burr that did not even stay with us. I mean, they may have decided to go to a different preschool. This is our pre-enrollment number, correct? Mr. Arnone keeps up with that as well for pre-K. This is our pre-enrollment number.
Right, but it includes students who may have gone to Burr, because we no longer have a pre-K
sure.
at Burr. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh,
So,
sure.
whereas if looking at the beginning of the school year number for this current school year, we wouldn't have included the pre-K at Burr, but now we are because the pre-K at Burr no longer exists. The students who may have gone there are now going to be part of this ECC number.
If they enroll.
Yeah, I mean, because some of them are going to kindergarten if they, 3-year-olds, for instance, stayed with us, and we can certainly probably follow up with you how many stayed with us out of that program, but if that's what you're asking. Somebody else had asked that
That's
question.
not exactly what I'm asking, but I just wanted to clarify.
Previous pre-K that wasn't part of the ECC is included in this number. That's what you're asking.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But the burst, well, I guess I'm just trying to clarify that this is actually a pre-enrolled number. So we didn't take burst students and say we had X amount of students this year, and we have the burr number that we plugged in as our estimate. This is an actual enrolled number for September. I just want to make sure that.
Right, but it's higher because the pre-K students are going to be part of this program, is all I'm clarifying.
Frank Arnone is Executive Director of Innovations. I've been working on all of the enrollments with Ms. Bruno, and there are approximately 4 students that are coming from Burr's program that are currently enrolled in the next year's program. There are about 12 students from the Stratfield program that are currently enrolled for the next year's program. So you are right, that this is including some of the Burr students and some of the Stratfield students.
Great, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you. Ms. Leeper? No? Ms. Picco?
I actually have some new comments, if you could imagine, after everything I've said. I had to write it down and my phone's about to die, so I'm going to go fast. For 14 years, the ECC location at Warv had served the district well. In 2005, the town committed to a specialized preschool location after investing more than $1.7 million of taxpayer money to do so. The town's taxpayers also invested in $105,000 in a learning skills playground at the Ward ECC, and further invested $1,700 for a playground canopy, $43,000 for a fall zone, another $48,000 for a replacement fall zone. So that's a $200,000 just on the Ward playground alone. Factor in the initial investment and building improvements, maintenance over the years, and we're sitting on a $2 million plus facility that has no functional inadequacy other than we've run out of space. It makes zero sense to me at this time to take a $2 million investment off the table as a specialized learning space, especially when we don't need it for Ward students right now. This is perfectly designed to these children. I don't see moving them to another school.
Mr. Peterson, followed by Ms. Jacobson.
Just to follow up on that a little bit, one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot since our last meeting, Mrs. Canelli brought this up, was the topic of itinerant services. You know, the Ward site has a lot of advantages, especially its unique, you know, purposeful its entry that's separate from the school. And you know, when we talked about we don't want 2 different programs, I think that we took a sense of the board at some point. But I'm wondering if there's any, and I don't want to reopen a can of worms here, if there's any thought to maintaining the Ward site for a certain population, and especially for the itinerant services, and that's a comment that's been raised by parents of the elementary schools. How are these going to be integrated in our school day? And having an, you know, an overflow site that is. I understand the equity angle of it, but I'm also loath to simply turn our back on that site, especially when by the Millennium McBroom projections, we're going to be under that 1,400 number at Ward by 2023.
I'll take a stab at it, and then you guys are welcome to jump in. Our itinerant numbers running between 20 and 40, whether it's the beginning of the year or the end of the year. So, you know, keeping that site for that purpose, it's not enough children, you know, for itinerant services. Whether or not we keep the ECC site and we go to a school, you know, the recommendation really was at the request of the board, and so that's why we went out and looked for 2 sites. You know, I think that we think programmatically, yes, they're going to be different. That having an ECC and having a school site, you know, one's at a K-5 setting, and yes, they're different. certainly if the board decides to go in that direction, the staff is going to make it work.
No? Oh, Jen, I'm sorry, Ms. Jacobson.
I have a couple questions and I'll have a couple comments. On page 3 of the presentation, when you're talking about the Stratfield PK TBD, can you explain or extrapolate a little bit on the TBD? Are you holding those 2 classrooms into?
Sorry, where are you?
Page 3.
Oh, I'm on page 1, sorry. I even got new glasses. Okay, with you. Yep.
We're pretty much banking on those 2 classrooms needing to be stayed for ECC, right?
So this was presented at the last meeting. And the reason it says to be determined is that's going to be a board decision because we have children who have just moved in that building. This is their 2nd year. Next year is their 3rd year. 2020 will be their 4th year in that building. So you're not going to want, your 4-year-olds may go to kindergarten, but you're going to have 3-year-olds that are there. Their parents are probably not going to want them to be moved to Holland Hill or North Stratfield, that next year. So we left it to be determined because we also, by the time you get to 2020, we just don't know what's happening either. So it's a future board decision, and probably, as you know, probably not even this board by the time you get to 2020. It's different people. So we were just trying not to be too far out there with that, and knowing that it's going to be transitional. And Stratfield parents are enjoying, I think, having the pre-K there. So I think you may have people who will advocate to keep it there, especially we're seeing the peer model. Parents love having the pre-K in their building, which, I think we heard from Burr parents when we were moving it out of Burr. They really do like having a pre-K in their school. Yeah.
Mr. Mancusi, do you anticipate for the early childhood population to continue to grow at the clip that it's been growing at? Meaning we're going to probably need, sorry, what's everyone laughing at?
Just have heard that question numerous times at other, sorry.
The answer
Sorry,
is,
Ms. Jacobson.
I expect it to grow, continue to grow.
So it's likelihood that we're probably going to need those Stratfield classrooms anyway, regardless, right?
The 4 Stratfield classes that we are planning on for next year?
Or at least 2 of them still,
Yes.
or part of them, right? Yes. Going forward, okay.
I will say this, the wonderful ECC staff behind me. They're very passionate about what they do, and they change lives. They make difference every day in the lives of families. So does our ECC Stratfield staff. So I've said this, I'm like a broken record. We can deliver high-quality early childhood programming in 1 site, in 2 sites, in multiple sites if needed. We will do what the board decides we need to do, and we will guarantee high-quality early childhood programming for our youngest children in Fairfield.
Can I add that I think understanding how many open seats there are might be helpful too. This is not something where I think in 2020 all of a sudden we don't expect it to be that fast. So I don't know if you brought those numbers with you or if we have to send those to the board, but we've gone in and calculated how many seats for special needs children. So we're not anticipating by 2020 all of your seats are gone.
If we max out at 15, we currently have about 40-something seats before all our classes max out at 15. So we should be fine for next year with that number.
Thank you. The dots on page 3 in our red, green, yellow, blue dot, is that the Malone and McBroom projections, or is that the updated projection that we got for this year that has about 90 less students enrolled? So I'm just kind of trying to understand what projection you used for these color dots.
Yeah, this is building utilization, and you can't confuse it with enrollment projection. So building utilization means if you had a building built for 504 and you took 1 or 2 classrooms out of circulation, then it's no longer a 504. Mm-hmm. Then you apply how many classrooms are you utilizing according to the utilization. So you can't really mix the two. This is based on actual utilization, looking at 2019, 2020, how many children, how many classrooms are predicted to be in that building once you take those special programs out.
Okay. So I'm starting to count up all of these classrooms in terms of the Stratfield rooms, the Math Academy rooms, the 10 pre-K rooms, the 2 more CLCs that we're adding at Burr and Riverfield, a possible non-504 at Mill Hill. And what I'm coming up with is 20 classrooms. Does that sound roughly correct?
To be honest, I have that chart somewhere that we've presented, but I don't think it's in here tonight, and I to actually calculate it. I
Okay. So it's around that, right? Because we got 12 PK rooms, we got 2 for the Math Academy, we have 6 CLCs. So when I go out a year or 2, that's fine because we're in a lull, right? Enrollment rise. But when I go out 10 years from now and I go into 2027, which is not hard to do because they're already in school, they're in 3rd grade, they're in 2nd grade, they're in 1st grade, I can count that up. We're taking 20 classrooms out of circulation for K-5 with all of that programming. And so when I go out to the enrollment projections, when we start to climb back up again, have you, Dr. Jones, been able to tell us what the utilization for our K-5 schools would be at that point?
Okay, K-5 schools for what point?
In 2027, 28, with the enrollment projections that we have today available to us.
I have ran those, but I don't think we've presented this to the board.
And how high is it?
I don't have that with me tonight, so I'd have to send that to you. But on the classrooms, the utilization, we're not counting on adding additional CLC, CLCS. Those things are ongoing, you know.
Oh, no, I know. I'm just counting what we're having, plus we're adding right now.
And to be honest, even when I did 2027, so much of that's going to depend on what is the board doing with Malone and McBroom, because, you know, what you can see is what this does now. So the work you do next year, if you know you've taken up seats in those buildings, that's the work you've got to ask Malone and McBroom to do.
Right, so my point is
So
that...
I can't calculate it is what I'm saying, because I don't know what you're going to do.
Right, but it is about 20 classrooms. So at the end of the day, here's my point. My point is that 20 classrooms is an elementary school, right? So whether we're closing an elementary school, which no one here I think wants to do, or you're taking elementary capacity out of 20 classrooms, it's the equivalent, isn't it?
24 classrooms is what we plan for of 504.
Right, but we do have schools with less than 20 classrooms. What my point is that by building in all of these classrooms and all of these programs in our K-5 schools, we are in equivalency closing a school.
I would say that if you listen to what we'll present tomorrow night at Mill Hill, I think you're making that point, that we have unique programs out in our building, and people in the community that are some decision makers in other areas don't understand what building utilization means. We're going to try to help, you know, articulate that more effectively. Hopefully tomorrow it will be easier because we know ECC's outgrown. So we're dealing with an issue, and the board's been studying it all year, that this time last year we couldn't say because we hadn't had a chance to do any of the work. So, you know, I think absolutely.
Right. So going further than that, if you, by tomorrow, hopefully, I know that you've run numbers already and you're going to be going in front of the Board of Selectmen about Mill Hill. Do you think it is possible, I've done it myself, so I don't know what the answer is, but if you could officially be able to give to the board and the Board of Selectmen what the utilization rate is for our entire K-5 population going out within our enrollment projections and what that will mean. Because we spent a lot of time, we spent a lot of money, we have a lot of people who have advocated for years to get rid of portables, to stay within our class size guidelines, and what I'm saying is that by taking 20 classrooms out of commission, we're heading back there. We're heading back to higher class sizes, we're heading back to portables if Mill Hill is not a 504 and if the ECC comes out of Ward. Now, if someone else has different numbers, then I would love to see that math. I would love to see how everyone's gone out 10 years and how this fits. We need another school. We need Mill Hill to be 504. ECC absolutely is going to have to stay at Ward because otherwise the K-5s are going to be up to 95 or higher % utilization. That's what it is. Now, if I'm wrong, I would love to see that math. Please let me be wrong. So I have some serious concerns. We need all this programming. We need ECC. We need CLCs. There's not a question about any of that. We also need K-5. We also need to stay in our class size guidelines. We also don't want to be buying new portables. So I think we have to look at the long term, not 1920. I mean, great, 1920, yay, that's next year. What about 5 to 10 years from now? I don't want us to be making short-sighted decisions without all the information that we know was done in our history and led to a mess. So I would like to know by tomorrow what the K-5 utilization is with all of these classrooms taking out of circulation, if that is humanly possible, and I think we have a very big job to do tomorrow night.
Put on my cape.
I think we can run those numbers. I think that we can advocate, absolutely, that we need to advocate for a 504. I think we've already unanimously made that decision. I think that, you know, looking forward by 10 years, a lot could change. And where space goes, I think we also have to, as we're talking about the facilities, we need to come back down to programming and, you know, looking at the programming side and making sure that our programming is equitable for all of our students.
Where do we have 20 classrooms? Tell me, where do we have 20 classrooms, Christine?
Could we?
We don't have it.
Could we talk about the
Don't have it.
principal and not direct questions at individual board members?
Mrs. Maxon Canelli.
First, just and I believe in accepting the will of the board, and the will of the board indicated a direction of 2. So I just want to put to rest, because we've heard so much about ECC, one site, 2 site, and I just want to, before I go into my other questions, sorry, but got to put everybody on the spot here. I just want to be sure that is, I am correct that Mrs. Picco and myself, who had advocated for one site for ECC, that no one has wavered from that, and that we remain committed to the 2 different sites. I just want to confirm that before I pursue my questions regarding the information of the 2 different sites. Because I haven't changed my mind, Mrs. Picco clearly has not changed her mind, but I'm not going to belabor a point which has been made by the full board. However, given all of the additional feedback we've gotten from the public, et cetera, I just want to be sure that that remains a topic we are no longer debating.
The sense of the body, has anyone changed their original opinion on this topic, 1 versus 2? Seeing none, I think we're in the same place.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, I'm sorry to hear that, but that's fine. We got to move on. I agree that I definitely would like to see these, the 2027, utilization of how that looks. I think hopefully that will continue to be compelling. The notion, therefore, that means we absolutely have to keep with Ward. Obviously, that's something we are counting on not doing. So we need that before we can do any kind of vote at our next meeting. I mean, that's not something that the committee meeting tomorrow needs, but obviously we need to know, because I have been a big advocate for, as much as was one of my arguments for having one site, is I don't want to start pitting one site against another, one superior to another, which would invariably happen, and at the very least it does need to be into elementary schools in that regard. But I did have a couple of questions. On page 2, with the program rubric, I was wondering, through the chair to Dr. Jones, if you could explain because I actually had forgotten that Burr has 16 restrooms, which to me, that's a really big deal. And if you could explain why, with its enrollment numbers, it was labeled as moderately disruptive, whereas Holland Hill was labeled as low with a higher enrollment.
It's simply because Holland Hill doesn't have, we were looking at least disruption as far as moving families and children from a programmatic standpoint. Where you have a CLC like at Burr, we would need to relocate that program. It's very difficult to relocate a CLC program. Holland Hill right now doesn't have any unique program. So sorry. That was the aspect of that, is that we were looking at, with the renovation expansion, it's another 504 building, and it doesn't have any unique programming. So, I mean, it's a very qualitative in that it's low from our standpoint when we look at it from programming. If it's going to be incredibly disruptive to another unique program, then we were concerned about that. And Burr waivers where we think right now it could even be, the 2 CLC, 1 CLC, but it's running on the high end as well.
But this is also a snapshot in time of right now. It would also be possible, as we're talking about grandfathering Stratfield, it would be possible to grandfather that CLC program, wouldn't it?
Well, it's not the grandfathering aspect. You're taking 2 more classrooms out of circulation. So if you put a preschool there, you've got your preschool classrooms, plus you're taking out your CLC, plus you have a staff who is now trying to implement 2 different programs within the building. And there's a special skill set the staff really have when they have a unique program.
Right, I didn't phrase the question clearly enough. I mean, as in the CLC moves along, I'm not sure if I'm phrasing it correctly now. I know there's pre-K3, pre-K4. CLC for 3-year-olds, CLC for 4-year-olds. Does it have that I mean, the point is that it is reaching a point of 5 or 6 years where the children are generally aging out of it and then going to their respective elementary schools. Is that correct?
Well, one thing we've tried to do, though, is build in feeder patterns. We've added CLCs. You can speak to that, Mr. Mancusi. I see him ready to stand up. We've tried to get CLCs placed around the district where it's best for families and children. So Burr is a newer CLC for us.
Yeah, and we service CLC kids from age 3 through high school. And they are in elementary feeder patterns, so we were very conscious not to disrupt unique programs currently in our elementary schools.
Let me ask the question differently. The students who are 3, 4, 5 years old in the CLC at Burr, are they then going into Burr classrooms?
It depends on each.
No, 3s and 4s are at the ECC.
Yeah, the CLC, ECC kids will go to, when they go to kindergarten, they might go to a CLC, they might not go to a CLC.
So, sorry, that was a misunderstanding on my part. So let me change the question. The CLC students who are at Burr, how many of them would have been in a different elementary school if they were not taking part in the CLC program?
I don't have the breakdown in those feeder patterns. I can get that for you tomorrow. I mean, is that what you're looking for?
Right. I guess here's I'm just going to make up a hypothetical. If half of them were going to have been Stratfield students, or half of them were going to have been Jennings students, then it's a program that,
well, because we have them at Osborne Hill, Jennings, Dwight, Burr, we already have CLCs there, so if that was their home school,
I'll just make up
that's where they're going. Yeah. So
I'm just trying to get a sense of just how fixed is it in Burr. That's really what my point is.
It was added at Burr because it was needed at Burr. And is it 2 years or is this the 3rd year? I added it.
This is the 2nd year.
Yeah, it's the 2nd year.
I don't have the home school for the Burr CLC students on me. I believe I don't know what their home school would be.
Okay.
I can get that though.
And it changes every year. Yeah.
And I definitely understand the idea of multiple programs like that within a single building, that is challenging. That's why I was trying to get at is it possible to move it so that it were only, as I said, 16 bathrooms. It's hard to look at that and not at least ask about it. That's my point.
And I think part of, just to refresh the board's memory, that when one of our earlier discussions, there was concern about just time on the bus, and then having a possible preschool at North Stratfield at Burr, the 2 northernmost locations. It would be a longer bus ride for some students potentially that have special needs, and it might be a deterrent to those typical peers from around town enrolling in those preschools if they were.
Well, I wasn't necessarily advocating for Burr and North Stratfield. I'm just saying that as an option that we are not talking about.
As for Burr, fair point.
Christine?
Okay. I'm not done, but did you want to follow right up on that?
I was going to partially answer your question. Oh, only because I have a kid there.
I know.
Okay. I was just going to say, it's not so much about the CLC, it's the fact that the children in there have now become part of the community, and the staff there now service those children. So to move them would be disruptive to the students.
Okay. I don't think any of that involved my articulating my questions very well, so I'm just going to move on. For the drop-off and pickup, this is on the second page again, in terms of the facilities rubric that we were looking at. Could you speak more to the drop-off and pickoff? Because obviously it's something that we're concerned about. Again, we've heard about in letters, and it is not a non-factor in looking at our sites. And I was wondering if that's something that you are able to speak to, or I can get more information about later. If you're not ready to speak to it, my fault for not sending something in.
Sorry, just before you start talking about pickup and drop off, one thing I wanted to add to that, and I'm not sure if you were inferring that, is that because so we're specifically talking about Holland Hill has an earlier start time and an earlier end time. So I guess that would kind of go in, not only pick up and drop off in terms of logistics, site, all of that, but also in terms of the time. So I just wanted
The whole
to
package.
specify both.
So I didn't know if anyone could speak to how do these sites rank where that's concerned.
Yeah, that goes back to the facility night we presented on facilities. And the board actually, after we had that discussion, we ended up talking about making sure we had staggered, if you remember, drop-off times, which this year at Stratfield, we haven't been staggered and it still worked well, but we took the input from the board. So as far as like traffic and that sort of, it doesn't impact, it won't going forward, because they're gonna start slightly at a different time than the elementary, so that ECC children get dropped off, I think it's first at Stratfield. I can't remember if it's before or after. After? Slightly after. So it'll be slightly after, so that they're not having crossover. Is that what did that answer?
Yes.
Okay.
But then, of course, there's the logistics of these parking lots and where we're going to have room for all of that. Have the sites been actually compared with regard to that? In terms of, and it could be that they're all equally problematic, equally, no, this is going to work fine in terms of the added staff needs there, the parents who will or will not be choosing to put their children on buses to get them to the ECC.
We have looked at that as well, and again, when we have these 504 buildings, and most of them that we've talked about are the 504, their parking is all around 100 spots because they're built to have 504 K-5 children. So if they're only running 300 and something now, those studies would still, be applicable. With pre-K, it sometimes looks like, when I think we addressed this earlier, it looks like the numbers are higher, but they're AM, PM. So it's not as many as what you think.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from board members? Mr. Peters? I'm sorry, Mrs. Greber.
Again, just to get back to the earlier start time for Holland Hill, since Holland Hill is mentioned as one of the sites, is that something that you could see possibly being problematic? Would it be helpful? Would it be, just because it is, even if it's staggered, it still would be considerably earlier on both ends than regular element. I'm just trying to get a sense of.
I think, if we knew that it was, and we can certainly talk about that between now and the next meeting. We have already discussed it. There are a couple of different options, but we actually could still start ECC Holland Hill at the same time as ECC North Stratfield. Even though Holland Hill may not start at that time, we're already staggering. So if we wanted all our ECCs to run at the same time, we could still do that. But that was just...
That was my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Peterson, sorry.
Yeah, just to piggyback on something Ms. Canelli just said in terms of staffing, we're talking about students who are part-time, half-day. Is there a significant portion of staff? Because there are presumably going to be therapists and such that are, I understand we have a certain number of classrooms and we'll have a teacher per classroom, but are there, do you see what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. What I would say to that is staffing is always done by student need. So if we had a building with 504 students in it, K-5, we're going to have more service providers than we're going to have if a building has 350. So we feel like we will be able to accommodate that within the building because the buildings have been built for that. And we haven't found it, and I don't know, Mr. McKenzie, if you want to speak to it, but at Stratfield, we have not had challenges with that because Stratfield was built to be a 504.
Right, but they also expanded their parking lot with their 504 renovation.
Right.
Ms. Jacobson?
Just from a budgetary standpoint for the recommendation locations at this point, is the only thing we're looking at is this playground and the AC at North Stratfield for $105,000? Or would there be necessary items at the proposed Holland Hill location as well?
Well, that was part of the analysis when we did the facilities, and the biggest aspect is, you know, is the restrooms. And they have, I think it's 13 actually classrooms with restrooms there, and so they're very well equipped for that.
At North Stratfield?
Yes, yeah. Let me see, I know that probably.
I just looking, you don't have to give it to me now, 'cause we're not voting on this.
It's
If-
13. 13. Thank you. Oh, thanks.
No, I'm just looking for, before we vote on this, a total budgetary amount for both sites, or for any sites that we're going to be looking at, because that will have to be put into the fiscal year, for next year's budget.
It would be put in the 2020, 2021, so you'd have time to discuss that next year during the budget, and there will be decisions. For instance, at North Stratfield, which we've known all along, if we would want to put air. So the most updated number, you know, we had today is that if we change the model of the air conditioning, instead of doing the single units like we have, that generally they're around 7,000, if we double that number and it's just over, I've got it on here somewhere, 14,000, it's actually a unit that would hook into a central system if the board decides to go ahead and air condition that full building. So you could actually be, you know, thoughtful about that in the budget process next year.
Ms. Jacobson, my angle's, I can't see her hand, so, okay.
Just one quick follow-up on that with the air conditioning, and maybe through you, Dr. Jones, to our new facilities director. With regards to the AC, my only question or concern on that is, I know you say they can integrate into it, but how does that work with mechanical means of fresh air? And is it still just a more modified split unit, or is it something that truly would work into the fresh air system?
No, you are correct. It's just basically a more modified split unit. It's got a 5-ton unit that feeds off into 2 classrooms, and it would be multiple depending on how many classrooms you end up taking. What makes it a more modern situation is it has a network system to it, so it can tie into your automated building systems and be controlled from a central location. It would still need its own fresh air system if you went with the model of air conditioning the whole building.
But with this, there is no fresh air option, correct?
No, no, it's just like a split unit. It's only bringing in circulating air from the building.
Just to be clear, when we're talking about this, yes, it could be integrated with controls and whatnot, but realistically, if we were doing a full HVAC project at that school, we would probably be getting rid of these units. If we wanted mechanical means of fresh air as a gold standard in our schools.
Yes, or you can bring the fresh air into the classrooms and through the ductwork system and keep these split unit heads within the classroom as well.
Okay,
So
thanks for clarifying
you would
that.
have a split system.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Sleeper?
Through the chair to Dr. Jones, I have just 2 questions. And it's late and I'm tired, and we've talked about this along many times, so please forgive me if we've already discussed these things. But is the difference, I feel bad to walk away from the Ward site because it's perfect. We've invested a lot of money into it. So is there real equity concerns between doing Ward in 1 elementary school versus 2 elementary schools, or is it perceived equity?
That's a hard question. I think there will be differences in the 2 programs, but there are differences between all 11 elementaries. So that's the easiest way I could answer that. Anytime you have 2 different schools, they never look exactly the same, even if you intend them to. I think programmatically, being in a K-5 building, some of the transitional pieces, you know, if you have a child, you're not sure if they want to go to kindergarten, they can go visit kindergarten the entire last month of school and, you know, sit through. And Rob and I, Mr. Mancusi and I both have experience with both models, so there are things like that that can be a benefit in one versus, you know, another. I do think the peer model is going to be more effective out in elementary schools versus the ECC, but it doesn't mean that over time that couldn't change either. You know, it's hard because we haven't had space there, really, truly for a peer model, so can we change that mindset of having a preschool program? Possibly, you know, that we'll see that change.
Thank you. And then the other question I have, and I don't know if it's better for Mr. Mancusi or not, is I'm definitely sensitive to the concern of our ECC staff about the continuum of services. But one of the things I continue to struggle to understand is if we have two sites the size of our current ECC, why can't the continuum of services be delivered as it's currently being delivered?
One of the charges the board gave us in terms of considering two sites was to have, as best we could, match programs from one site to another site. We are going to have a CLC at Stratfield and at Ward next year. We're going to have the continuum of services. Preschool staff was, they were uncompromising about that, splitting into two sites. So when the board gave us the charge to try to mirror the two programs, we went back and we did the best we could to make that happen.
And I'm going to go even stronger. The board didn't just say mirror the programs. The board said to find 2 elementary sites. So that is what we did. Yeah.
That's true.
But also to the continuum of services, I guess I didn't ask my question clearly. I could understand if we were taking the program and making it into several very small programs, how that could impact the continuum of services, because you'll have fewer providers in each program. But if we are essentially having 2 programs the size of the current program, and I understand that we also will have a higher peer ratio, but we're also creating room to grow. So won't each program continue to have the continuum of services that our current program has?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Dwyer?
It says that this is a first reading.
It is.
And so is it a first reading with a proposed motion that's in front of us, or is it a first reading that says we are adopting this proposal dated May 21st? What is the first reading that we're reading?
The first reading is to accept staff's recommendations of having the 2 locations at the ECC, long-term solutions at North Stratfield and Holland Hill, with...
So essentially...
It's really the implement the timeline as proposed on page 3.
Or implement the program as described in this handout. Okay.
Yes.
Page 3 specifically.
But page 3 specifically in terms of phasing out Stratfield and phasing in Holland Hill and North Stratfield. And I would just remind the board and the public in terms of, the sites that we did look for. We looked at universities for space. We looked for other town facilities for space. We looked for private-owned schools for space in order to keep the ECC together. We're not successful in finding an alternate space that was large enough and to house the program, which brought us back to looking at a current elementary school. So to Ms. Jacobson's point, in terms of finding the elementary school classrooms, if you take over a full elementary school, you're still faced with the same problem. So I think from the conversation that we had tonight, I think the question before the board is really what we do with the current ECC at Ward. As we move forward, whether or not that stays an ECC space or not. And the direction that we have given staff to this point was that we did not think that it should stay at Ward because of the concern that there would be different programs, concerns about the peer model, and that's where we are. That's brought us to this point right now. So moving forward I would ask the board to think about that. If you have any, thoughts about that right now you want to share. If not, continue to send your questions to staff. Just in the essence of time, I think I'm going to move this forward right now. I don't know if someone has any questions or a new question that hasn't been covered. Ms. Jacobson.
Just the last comment. I just want to point out that in terms of our enrollment projections that we currently have, that those do not include any future growth that we are anticipating to come, nor do they anticipate town development, which we all know where that is. So factoring that consideration into hundreds of students. So just want to make that point and how that's going to play out. I think we just need to know what the full plan is.
Can you clarify what you mean when you say is not factoring in growth?
Because Mr. Mancusi was able to tell us that he doesn't foresee that this population to stop growing and that it will continue to grow. And so even what we're planning on now would not be sufficient, possibly
Okay, so
in
you're
the
not
future.
talking about enrollment projections not including pre-K?
Oh, yeah, no, because our enrollment projections only include a stagnant number for pre-K.
Okay, I was just curious
Yeah.
if that's what you were getting at.
I meant
Okay.
growth in the program.
Okay. All right, thank you. Moving on, first reading of charge to Malone and McBroom. This is just a kind of a change of direction from our redistricting principles conversation, which I think was a valuable exercise for us to have just in terms of discussing the principles, getting an idea of where board members are, but in terms of moving forward with a charge to Malone and McBroom, I brought us back to our board goal and really made the focus on overcrowding and addressing possible racial imbalance. Ms. Jacobson emailed me with suggested language, so I will give her the floor to address.
Do you just want to talk about it in general and then get to propose?
I want to talk about it in general, in terms of, board thoughts. I did email it. I have not really heard. I heard some concerns about the last line of the charge and that it was redundant, and I will read it. Existing redistricting guiding principles and facilities planning principles should be considered and aspired to in developing redistricting models. Proximity and safety should remain a priority. Proximity and safety are both addressed in the redistricting guiding principles and the facilities planning principles, so that last line is somewhat redundant, in that it's covered by the existing documents, which will stay as written and something to aspire to. That was a thought that was shared to me, and your suggested change to the language was another consideration. I'm just rushing through this just in the essence of time for the board. I welcome any comments about the charge. With the ECC locations, number 2, that would, when we're ready to move forward with Malone McBroom, they're going to need to know where we foresee these locations. So to answer some of the questions that came up, like will the location of the ECC be factored into any future redistricting? Absolutely. And that's where we are. So Ms. Jacobson, if you want to think on your recommended motion, I will give the floor to Mr. Dwyer and then Mrs. Greber.
Go ahead.
I was the one that raised the question on the last sentence, proximity and safety. I am an advocate for giving Malone and McBroom clear direction as to what we mean by the words that we send to them, and proximity and safety is not that well defined, and I believe what it means is that we have transportation policy that tells us what is the mileage that people should be able to walk in, what is the safety concerns around busing and transporting children. And so if we're going to give a direction to Malone and McBroom about what they should observe, I would rather say we remind them that we have policy 3140-something and appropriate administrative regulations that clearly define to them what we mean by proximity and safety. And so that was where I was heading. It's not that I don't agree that we ought to be thinking of proximity and safety, but we ought to have Malone and McBroom be able to say, well, what do you mean by that? And point them to the board policy that is very clear as to what we mean.
Mrs. Canelli.
Mr. Dwyer was not the only one who challenged that last sentence. I did as well. And I did it first and foremost purely for redundancy, in terms of to pick those 2 out and not some of the other items. It just,
We've referenced them here. We have explicitly directed them to look at these guiding principles and facility planning principles. I will be advocating that the last sentence gets struck for that reason. Secondly, because I take a different tack from Mr. Dwyer regarding, for example, the word proximity, which it's, again, we have those other principles, but if we're just going to throw the word proximity out there, are we then saying, well, let's start taking a look again at which elementary schools feed which middle schools? And if we're going to look at that, then are we looking at which elementary schools feed which high schools? If we're looking at if proximity, it's including it in there invites, as Mr. Dwyer points out, an explanation of definition. And if you're going to do that, then that's a whole other discussion, which we've already chased down a few rabbit holes on that. I think it's cleaner and neater that we stay with our existing documents and strike that last sentence. Not because I'm not interested in it, but because it's already there.
Dr. Jones, when you work with consultants, do you give them just, I'm assuming, guidelines just in terms about what our busing is, and just from a managerial perspective, as they tackle this, what sort of information do they get just from staff?
Well, they'll start asking, they'll pull the bus routes, they'll pull, how many students are enrolled at each building, they'll drill down to, all of that information from grade level to, ethnicity, everything that they can get to be able to look at moving students, and we're asking them to look at moving students around the district, what that would look like.
Okay.
So it's everything that basically our data can provide them.
Okay. Any other board members' thoughts about the last sentence?
Not about the last sentence.
I'm just going to try to address what has been shared as a concern. Okay. Ms. Jacobson?
Oh, wait, no, Nick can go.
What?
Mine's not about the last
Oh, no, I'm not about the last sentence either.
No, well, I'm going to let you, would you like to address the language that you shared?
I would like to let Nick go first if he has a quick follow-up.
No, I just wanted to say that I appreciate the way this is written. I agree with that last sentence being struck. And I think that we've had some long discussions. We've got a lot of public input. I think we've done a good job listening to each other, listening to the public. But at the end of the day, as Mr. Peterson has said, we're doing our job. That's a hard job, and we're not always going to be everybody's fans. So I think that what we need to do here is move forward. I think it's important for us to move forward and get this ball rolling. And as I've said before, get these scenarios back. And I'm okay with aspiring to, I think it's worded well, to the existing guiding principles and facility planning principles, because it doesn't nail us down to them, but it says that we incorporate them and that they look at them, and that I don't think that the way this is written will handcuff them, in a way that I was worried before. So I appreciate this motion, and I plan on supporting it. So I'd like to hear what Mrs. Jacobson has to say.
Thanks. When I suggested this, when I first read this, it was not clear to me about who we were talking about. And so I like to be real clear. Because in terms of our charge, not our charge, our board goal, right, that we passed last fall, that to me was very clear. So when I read number one, and we've also had projections come back before, or scenarios come back, where they would tell us where the elementary movement was, but not give us the middle school or high school impact information as a part of that. So I wanted to be clear in that we were looking for, when they do these elementary scenarios, that they would be providing the upstream impact into the middle schools and high schools, and then the 85% utilization to me didn't make any sense, because we already know that both of our high schools are overcrowded. So I don't know, there is no possible way for them to actually do that. So that didn't make any sense for me to be included in that. So those are just some of my thoughts about it. I was not clear on who we were talking about. 85% is not possible, and I wanted to make sure that we got the upstream impact utilizations for the middle and high school.
Mrs. Canelli.
One quick question. I'm sorry, I don't know this off the top of my head. What is our utilization rate for the middle schools?
It's over 100%, actually. Oh, I thought I had that. It's tomorrow. I know Woods is over 100%.
It's like 101, 96, and.
Yeah, I can bring it up.
90, they're all over.
Okay, thank you.
You can't do it at middle school either. So if we're trying to be clear, I don't know why we would give them a direction that's not possible.
And I just included that copy just because we were talking about, the goal said overcrowding, a comprehensive plan. So I just wanted just to have the number in there, just so they knew what it was. Appreciating that, given our enrollment and our space, they would not be able to reach it, but that is what we aspire to. So any additional thoughts on Ms. Jacobson's suggested revision to the language? Can I get the sense of the body if we want to strike the 85% utilization and add the target, change the language? Or do we want to keep the charges written? We're not voting right now, just.
Or some iteration.
One question I have is, thank you, Mr. Peterson, and I do have it here, it's just in a pile of stuff, regarding the utilization rates, is that this as a snapshot, is it appropriate to set, that based on which enrollment projections that we're setting this percentage? Because, for example, you go out 5 years, and Tomlinson is almost dropping below 80% utilization rate, and the middle schools are swinging down. That, to me, that would be, I get the high school picture, but the middle school picture, that's where this would have a value. If they're all three are skyrocketing above, I agree there's not a lot of value, but I certainly wouldn't want, if there's no reference to this, I certainly wouldn't want to see the middle schools set up to get more askew. And I appreciate at least this would be saying what the impact is. So I'd like some kind of, I don't know if there's a way to combine it, because I like Mrs. Jacobson's wording, but I don't want 85% to be ignored specifically because of the middle school piece.
Dr. Jones has the utilization projected right now.
Yeah, on a presentation I'm doing for Board of Selectmen tomorrow for the middle school. Roger Ludlow Middle School is currently 830. It's actually going to go up to 866. And they're at 99% capacity with 875. So they're high 90s by 2027. Woods is currently 910. Their building only is capacity of 840. They're way over. So they will actually drop by 100 students, but they're still going to be just under that 96% capacity. Tomlinson is the one that's at 660, and by 2027, they're estimated to drop by 100 students. So that's the building that will be under.
Right.
Yes.
So it's exactly because of those numbers that I wouldn't want to have nothing in here as a nod towards that, because I certainly wouldn't get that percentage to be worse, and quite frankly, there should be some kind of a shift there. If we're doing, I mean, again, let's get this right. So that's my hesitation of just completely striking it, is I would like a nod towards it because of the middle school, but I do certainly like the additional language being explicit there.
So moving forward, Ms. Jacobson, are you amenable to leaving the 85% utilization rate at the secondary schools, but including your copy to provide utilization rate impact to secondary schools for each elementary scenario, just to make sure that we get the data back in a format that is useful and comprehensive?
Yeah, I mean, do I have to tell you right now?
No, you don't, but I just, well, if you don't have to tell me right now, but sometimes you just have a feeling one way or the other, yes or no, and if you...
It sounds fine, but you know me, I like to think a little too on it, so.
I'm just looking for some direction just for our next meeting in terms of...
I think some sort of combination would...
Okay. Any other comments, Mrs. Greber?
Yeah, one question I had is just, do we have any sense, just in terms of how many plans we're looking for, or how many permutations? Just, is there a limit? Is it, do you know what I mean? Like, the last major redistricting that we had was quite some time ago, but I recall there were No, I'm talking about way back, that had you know, C1, C2, I mean, and every time you came back, so, I mean, there were probably over 20 at the end of the day. And I'm not saying I want that, but I'm just trying to get a sense, because then with Malone and McBroom in 2016, we had 6, but 3 right out of the gate were rejected by them within the parameters. So I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of, you know, do we want them to explore every single possibility, or do we want to put a cap on it? I'm just trying to understand just how much we're expecting to get back from them. And I don't know if Dr. Jones can speak to that, or I just wanted to kind of put that out there of like, what are we hoping to get back?
Yeah, I mean, I look back at even the work they did a year or so ago, but it was like all that structural change that they were looking at things that I'm not sure the board necessarily wanted them to do. It was more, I think, what we were asked to do from that ad hoc committee and looking at closing schools. I think if the board could ask for, you know, 2 or 3 scenarios that meet your criteria, it's certainly going to be much more cost effective, because if they come right out of the gate and do lots of iterations, if they give you 2 or 3, you can still amend those, you know, if you need to. If you ask for 6 or 7, they're going to give them to you, but sometimes it's almost too much. And I don't think it says, I mean, you're just asking for elementary utilization balancing, so I don't think they really have as many options as what we think.
Well, except I thought that some board members are looking for more than just elementary utilization balance.
Well, I guess that's
So
the
I
whole
guess
other,
I think I think that's probably one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up, is because I feel that while we, as a board, voted 9-0 for this goal, I think within the parameters of the goal, we have very different ideas about what we're looking for. And I think that that's something that we really need to figure out before we give Malone and McBroom guidance, because they may come back and we might say, well, you didn't do this because we wanted that. I think that I certainly don't want to handcuff them, but at the same time, I do want to give them a sense of what we're looking for. And if they come back with just elementary, then I don't think that's going to make everyone on this board happy. And so I'm just trying to figure out a way that we can give them the guidance so that we can make sure that what we get back is something that we can actually use.
I think if if this 85% utilization is secondary, I don't think it can impact high school, but it definitely on your middle school can bring you back iterations, because when you're sitting in 2027 at 99, 96, and 80, it's definitely out of balance. So, you know, if they go by this charge, they would have to take that into consideration.
Ms. Jacobson?
I have a follow-up on that. Not necessarily, because when they do the new enrollment projections and utilization rates, given 20 less classrooms possibly, then that all may very much change. So it's not necessarily what we think today.
Although when they came, like a year or so ago, most of those programs were built in. They did do the utilization. They actually did a whole iteration of that.
Pre-Ks and...
No, I know you're going to have some additional
Right.
space, but it's not going to be like none of those were built in. Because they looked at the CLCs before.
Yeah, but there's going to be a lot more, possibly. So, yeah, those things could all change, actually.
Mr. Dwyer and then Ms. Lieber.
The first word of that charge is target. And I think that the word target applies to both the 90% and the 85%. And so I would prefer to keep the 85% in there, simply because it gives us a standard against which to look at the 3 middle schools. And indeed, if we find ourselves that it's 96, 90, and 78, well, that's not the balance that I think the board would want to see and plan for the long term. So I just, because I see that word target as modifying, if you will, the strict 85%, it just says we want to try and get a balance. So I would prefer that phrase in. I don't have any problem with Ms. Jacobson's phrase down below, because I think we do have to see what the impact is on secondary schools.
Ms. Lieber?
Through the chair to Dr. Jones, I'm wondering what's the rationale for the 85% in the secondary schools and not 90?
I'm sorry, why elementary is 90?
And secondary is 85.
That would be a better question for Malone and McBroom. I would say that, and sometimes you'll see 85, sometimes you'll see 90, and it changes, but it probably has more to do with the high school programming and being able to have the adequate spaces for high school unique programs.
Mr. Dwyer.
And I think Mrs. Gerber probably knows this better than I do, but the 85 and 90 came from the original long-range facilities plan that was put together. And I believe that they looked at the materials out there and felt that 90% for elementary school and 85% for secondary schools was, quote, a best practice in terms of planning for the kind of programs that are there. So that's where it came from.
Thank you.
Mrs. Greber.
Yeah, just to follow up on that. So, I mean, this was before I was on the board, but it was the facilities planning principles that was voted on by the board in 2010. And I know that the facilities committee at the time did a lot of research looking at optimal and headroom and whatnot. And so there was a definite, purposeful rationale for putting it at 85. And that's what it's been all along.
Okay. We're going to move on. If anybody has any thoughts or additional language over the next couple of weeks, please forward it along. Approval of minutes. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the following minutes. April 9th, 2019 special Board of Ed meeting, April 9th, 2019 regular Board of Ed meeting, April 23rd, 2019 special BOE meeting, April 30th, 2019 special BOE meeting, May 7th, 2019 regular BOE meeting. Can I have a motion? Ms. Pitko, seconded by Mr. Dwyer. All in favor? Motion passes 9-0. Superintendent's report. Dr. Jones, the floor is
Yeah, it's
yours.
getting late, so I'll just have a couple of items. Just to remember that a lot of the art shows have been going on. They've been absolutely fabulous. The annual art show with the food trucks at Pequot Library is on the 29th. And that's one of those where you have to get there early now or you won't get to park. It's become such a big, fabulous event. Just building on what the students had shared, our rocketry team, it was the first time that we've had a team actually make it to nationals in Fairfield, and they actually were there last weekend and did very well, represented Connecticut well. And then also just to let people know, we are in the middle of the Fairfield Ward High School headmaster search. And we've got a fantastic committee. It has, parents, teachers, administrators, and we feel very confident that within probably the next week we'll be able to get a headmaster signed. Fantastic candidate pool. So that's it for me.
Any questions for Dr. Jones? At her report? Okay, seeing none, moving on to committee liaison reports. Ms. Pitko.
I just want to report that SEPTA's next meeting is Wednesday, the 29th, 7:30 at Ludlow
Thank you.
High School.
Mr. Dwyer.
I just want the board to know that since December, I have been diligently attending the standing projects special, whatever it's called, building committee. And they have continued working on the two that have been assigned to them, the middle school roof and security. Both are on or under budget. The security is kind of like on time schedule and should be done early this summer. The roof is a long soap opera punch list debate, which the committee is ensuring that we end up with a roof that will be usable and we'll be proud of. So count that as my report for 6 months worth of meetings.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dwyer. Mrs. Gerber?
Well, I believe everyone is aware that the Mill Hill Building Committee will be presenting to the Board of Selectmen tomorrow for a vote on the funding request for the full project, 5 o'clock, Town Hall. Anyone wishes to join me, please feel free. And they have received a lot of information both from Dr. Jones and from the building committee itself. The traffic survey consultant will be there. I believe a member of the police department will be there. A number of questions have been asked and answered, but I'm sure there will be more tomorrow. And I will keep everyone posted.
Thank you. Mrs. Canelli?
Just to update the board that little teases here and there, but the policy committee has finalized a draft of a homework policy. It's now with staff to get their feedback so that we can crunch over their feedback one last time at our June 4th meeting, but we are definitely on schedule as promised to have a first reading at our first June meeting, with the idea that if there's any feedback from the board, we have another policy meeting on the 18th to discuss board feedback with hopefully a vote at our final June meeting on that homework policy, but we are on schedule with it.
Ms. Jacobson?
Just a quick report from the state. So I've been watching lots of sessions and watching debates on a lot of bills, but we're getting close to the end of the session here on June 5th, so we should be anticipating a budget bill, within a couple of weeks. So if there's anything important in there, I'll be sure to pass it on in terms of what is in it or not in it.
Just to follow up on that, I spoke to the first selectman. He has spoken to Bob Smoller. They are working together on a statement just to express Fairfield's concern and disapproval about moving the pension expense down to the towns. Reached out to me as board chair to see if any board members wanted to lend their support either as individuals or as a board to express our concern about what that might mean to Fairfield. I think they're looking to get something out by the end of the week. So if any board members would like more information on that, please let me know. Found out about it today, so I didn't have an opportunity to add it to our agenda for a voting item. I think we'll see how it goes over the next few weeks. If it seems like it's moving steam, I think that maybe we can bring it up as an agenda item, whether or not our board as a board wants to make a more official statement. And it's after, so. Okay. But I encourage you all as individuals to, reach out to Ms. Jacobs for guidance if you want to do any individual advocacy. So Roger Sherman Building Committee met tonight. Our meeting schedules now are unfortunately seem to be on the same nights. But they are moving forward looking at lockers right now for the summer. AC is not going to be in. I don't have anything else to report on that at this time. For PTA Council, the big news they wanted me to share, they have their call for nominations out for the 2019 Fairfield PTA Council Awards. There's the Alice B. McGrath Friend of Education Award, which is given to a person who is committed to the cause of excellence in our public schools and who has demonstrated clear leadership through their active involvement, not just in education, but the larger community stage as well. The Deanna O'Kieran Award, given in memory of a beloved past president, PTA Council past president, who worked tirelessly to promote public education, the PTA and its mission. And the Tricia Ford Money Award is given to an individual who is making a difference through advocacy and dedication to a single program or initiative that positively impacts Fairfield's children and the community at large. So if anybody has members of the community they want to nominate, I ask you to please reach out to PTA Council. There is also teacher awards for those teachers that are pursuing higher education. They have to be nominated by their headmasters, get a letter of recommendation and apply for those. More information can be found on the PTA Council website, or you can contact me, because I have the written. Nick.
I have a question for you on your Sherman Building Committee. Can you elaborate on why the AC is not moving forward? I thought we discussed that and they dropped other things to keep it within budget.
What's moving forward is just the timeline for happening this summer. Originally they were hoping to get it done this summer, but it just, in terms of their timeline, it's not going to happen until next summer.
Do we have a reason why?
They had to look at different units and getting all of the work. They didn't think they would be able to get all the work done while students were out of the building.
Okay.
So when is the timeline?
The following summer.
The following summer. If I misspoke on that, but that is the last, that was the last update that I had received on that. Okay. Open board comment? Mrs. Greber?
Just wanted to share the news that Ludlow Baseball won tonight, and they are going to the FCAC Finals versus #1 seed Staples. And last I checked, they're playing tomorrow night again. So back to back, and good luck to Ludlow.
Mrs. Max Canelli?
Just a bon voyage to our 3 Odyssey of the Mind teams who are heading out to Michigan, and that they will be competing in Worlds this weekend.
And I thank the board for I'm very tired, coming off of a college graduation, came back from Boston today. So I want to thank you for your patience tonight through my exhaustion, and really give a shout out to all of my daughter's teachers from kindergarten through 12th grade in the Fairfield Public Schools, because I think that, having a college graduate is a testament to their work and the dedication of past boards of education. And with that, we go to the public. Any members of the public, come forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Bonnie Bertelli. Surprise, I'm going to talk about the ECC. I think I got a little confused in this whole process with the first reads and things. I will say that if you're looking for the temporary solution for the 2 locations, I would definitely go with what Ms. Pitko said. We put a lot of money into Ward. No matter where you go, the programs are not going to be equal. It's just a fact. Once you break this program up, it's not the same, which is why we've been so harshly advocating for the 1 location to maintain this and not take 5 steps backward for Fairfield. So I am also going to sort of beg you to please consider giving Malone and McBroom the option to give us a scenario for a dedicated location. If we're already paying them and they're already doing it, I don't see why we can't throw in, a few other scenarios there. I think the staff and the parents deserve to see what they come up with, if there's any possible chance. So I'll just leave you with that.
Good evening, I'm Matt O'Gurick, 287 South Benson Road. I just wanted to talk about the charge to Malone and McBroom. It seems to me that there's Malone and McBroom should do certain things and then may do other things in the guidelines. I just think that the principle that neighborhood schools should be maintained is something that shouldn't get washed away amongst several or many guiding principles that may or may not be considered or aspire to. Should be elevated to one of these numerical priorities that Malone and McBroom should take into consideration. One of the issues that I think I see with these principles, when we were debating the principles, is that there just wasn't a clear priority as to which principles should trump others. And I always kind of thought and maintained that there's some principles that are just clearly more important than others. This document seems to indicate that 90% operational utilizational rate is the main objective. But I think a close second, if not on parity with that, is to maintain neighborhood schools. The conversation that was had at the last meeting I thought was a really good one, and I'm surprised that a special meeting wasn't set aside to really kind of root that one out. That was a brilliant idea. And the fact that, and I'm speaking of this from primarily an elementary school basis, that is such an important value of this town, no matter where you are in town, that it should be up here. It should be, at number 2. Or 1, that they ought to definitely take that into consideration, or they should target that, if you will, and not just, casually take it into consideration as a principle that can get, kind of, balanced away by other principles. The other thing is I keep hearing this over and over again that, we don't want to handcuff Malone. They weren't handcuffed the last time they came out with scenario C, which violated pretty much every single guiding principle. So I don't think they're going to be handcuffed this time around. And I also kind of agree with the question that what are we really asking for? Are we asking for them to come back with fresh new scenarios? Are we expecting to see scenario C, for example, to come back again? You know, and will we reconsider that? So those are some of the thoughts I had. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to come forward?
Hi, my name is Matthew Halleck. I live at 6 Somerville Street in Fairfield. And about ECC, I know a lot. My wife's school psychologist, Gina, there, so I know a lot about it. I teach, you know, on the college level, like, and universities and stuff. And my whole business is with education and working and stuff. And anyway, what they do, first of all, what you guys do, you're like rock stars to me, totally. You're amazing. You be here till midnight on our behalf, and I'm really, really appreciative. Thank you. And you too, Jerry Ann and everybody that worked, the girls, the women at ECC especially, they're like angels to me. So anyway, looking at it, you know, it's now, it went in 10 years from like 80 to whatever it is, 160 students, and it's going to keep going up, right? 10 years from now, whatever, 300 students. It has to scale. You need long-term solution. And definitely everybody says one is the best solution, you know, but whatever, you make do with what you can. I mean, I was talking to Rob Mancusi the other day, and he was telling me, you know, some towns it's split up, some it's all one. You know, you try the best you can, you figure it out. Anyway, the point I'm making is I can help because 2 of my clients are like really leaders in cargo, tiny living. Like they take steel shipping containers and then they trick them out. You can make amazing stuff like pool houses, businesses. In Seattle, they have a whole town called Cargo Town made out of them. They're amazing if you look at tiny living and stuff. And my client, Joel Egan, he's the country's #1 guy. He's in Seattle. He loves me. And another one, Elbar Tiny Living in Westport, Elliott. It's great too. They make it. So we can make them, and you can put them down everywhere, really, really cheap. Any kind of site, I can tell you all about it, how to build it. But I'm proposing, these are tremendous assets, and I'll send you the link. You go to cargotecture.com. It's like architecture.com, but cargo. And Elbar, E-L-B-A-R, tinyliving.com. And that's a great asset that I'm giving you to the town, like the designers who can make that and the companies who can manufacture that. And you can get whatever you want to build, and it'll look amazing. You can, I think they should design it, actually. That's a whole other topic. I think I've always felt it would be better if women ran the world, and I think that they should have the board of directors and run this whole project if you do it. But you could site it wherever you want, from Oldfield to Ward, where it is now, to Fairfield U, to Sacred Heart U, to Tungsten Hill Park. I can give you a million places to site them, but you can like do all sorts of things. It's almost like Legos. They're like rectangles. And if you need, whatever, let's say in 10 years you need 300 students, and I don't know what the math is, say you need 10,000 square feet. That's only like 5 units, like 20 by 100. I mean, you can do it like right away, and you can do all sorts of stuff. You have a lot of flexibility, and it's really, really, really affordable. So I would like to just give you a whole presentation on that. I'll email it to you guys or whatever. I'll write up like a site plan and idea and show you this whole thing. And if it makes sense, you know, let's just talk about it. And if it doesn't, then we tried.
Thank you. Any other public comment? One.
Jill Vergara, 271 Old Post Road. I also wanted to address the charge to Malone and McBroom. I agree with Mr. Ogerick, who spoke before. I was disappointed that maintaining neighborhood schools didn't make it onto this charge. Even though it exists in the 2010 principles, I think it's important to delineate it here and outline it to Malone and McBroom. And I was also disappointed that keeping walkers as walkers didn't make it on this list, because I thought that there was a consensus with this board that is important to do. It's a cost saver for the town, and I think it would make sense to tell Malone and McBroom that. So thank you for your consideration.
Okay. Any other members of the public? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Pitko, seconded by Mrs. Gerber, all in favor? We are adjourned.